I'd like to call this meeting of the Clay County Commission to order. We will start with our invocation. Mr. Treasurer, if you would not mind leading us in prayer.
Okay. Lord Heavenly Father, look over this government body today and guide us as we prepare the budget for the coming year. Help us in our discernment for the proper allocation of funds. Also, Lord, keep us safe during this era of COVID. And we ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll. Here.
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 Very good. Before we move to the approval of the agenda, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping points. We are open during this meeting to the public. They are welcome to come in to our physical facility, obviously observing social distancing, wearing of masks, and the other protocols that are appropriate for our meeting. These are hearings, so it's going to be a little bit different format. I would ask that those addressing the commission make sure their microphones are on. There's a light on the collar, red for off, green for on. And when we are also doing audio recordings of this, so I would like people who are addressing the commission, at least at the initial point, to identify themselves and, if appropriate, what department or elective office they are from. And we will then proceed from there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that pretty well covers it. I also want to let everybody know that we are, in fact, live streaming today's meeting as well. So we are going to have that posted on YouTube at some point, but just want to let everybody know that we are, and I hope to continue live streaming not only this meeting but future meetings, but we will see how that works as far as the technology and our ability to keep up with it goes. With that, back to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Motion's been made for the approval of the agenda for the Wednesday, January 13, 1 p.m. meeting. Discussion. I would like to make a motion that we suspend the rules and on our agenda that we delete some of the items there. I would make a motion that we remove honorary resolutions, public hearings, commission sessions, comments on agenda items, approval of minutes, written reports, and executive sessions. That would leave, apart from what we've already done on our agenda, meeting schedule. It does obviously have the discussion items. Any public discussion on those items is certainly welcome and appropriate when we bring those up. And it would also retain comments on non-agenda items so that if any citizens, office holders, or anyone else cares to comment on non-agenda items, that will remain on the agenda. And finally, of course, we have recess and adjournment. So I'd like to make that motion in the interest of moving the meeting along a little more quickly. Some of these items for a specialized meeting like this are a little extraneous, so hopefully that will get us through here a little bit more efficiently. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson? Yes.
Very good. It passes. One other thing I want to point out is that I will not be voting on these items under our new constitution. The presiding commissioner only votes under specific circumstances, the main one being when there is a tie vote on the commission. So I don't want anybody to be thrown off by the fact that I'm not voting. It's not that I'm sitting it out. It's that under our new constitution, our new rules, those are the parameters that we are working under. That brings us back to approval of the agenda as amended. Are there any further changes or discussion on the agenda as amended? Nothing? Okay. If you would, Commissioner Carpenter, if you'd like to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson? Yes.
Very well. We will now proceed to meeting schedule. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, January 14, which is, of course, tomorrow, 9:30 a.m., and it will be a further installment of our budget hearings. So that is the next. We skip the other items, and that brings us to discussion items, and that would be under budget hearings. The first under our budget hearings would be Department 505, which is the County Collector's Office. So we will proceed with that. If you would please introduce yourself. And in addition to talking about budget, if you would give everybody a quick overview of what your department does so those listening who are not familiar might be better served.
Absolutely, Commissioner, and I'm so happy to be back in budget meetings again. Lydia McAvoy, Clay County Collector. Before I begin, I'm realizing, since we are doing this differently, is there a vote happening on each part right now, or is this just a hearing?
Thank you for asking. That's a good question. We are not taking up or down votes.
Okay.
What we're doing is we are discussing it, and then the budget team will be taking those into account.
Absolutely.
Also, obviously, seeing if there's any consensus to be had, but they will be then presenting those to us at a future date.
All right, and I do have copies. I realize I didn't make enough because I do need to keep one. I'm happy to provide additional copies. Madam Clerk, would it be okay if I give you a copy separately at another time for the record? Okay, that would help. You are commissioners.
Thank you.
Just wasn't thinking about what we were also. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Ms. Minden and Treasurer, can I give you guys a copy of what they're ready, or is they I kind of need this and then they know why. All right, so just on the top is my budget, just so we can refer back to it. And that's just my budget on my main department fund. I actually have multiple funds, but we can discuss that as we go through. Also, one housekeeping item before I start. Has there been a decision, or will there be a decision on the 2% increase and how that will be handled in budgets? Have we not decided that yet?
That is still under consideration.
Okay, all right. My only comment to that is the way they were doing it piecemeal. I have an interesting legal question, which we would refer to legal counsel, of course, but I do have a statute that says that my staff has to be given the same increase as other county employees. I don't know that they contemplate a piecemeal approach, so I'm kind of open to that, but I just wanted to make sure that's on the record.
A good
I may have
question, a good question to forward to council so that he can
Yes.
give us additional guidance.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we collect and distribute $400 million for the taxing jurisdictions. I do want to make it very clear up front that almost nothing I collect comes to the county. I think you guys get about $4 million of that. Over $100 million goes to North Kansas City school districts. So I have an interesting function in my office. I collect other people's money. And so the collector's office is statutorily rather independent, so that if the commission does decide to do something similar to maybe over the last few years, the school districts don't suffer. And so my budget is handled a little differently, and I have some additional funds, specifically for situations like just happened where we ended up collecting taxes outside for several weeks, which was very expensive. And we also collect taxes outside in June. So that's exactly why I have the TMF, is so that, which I'll talk about in a moment, is for those types of emergencies.
When we use acronyms, if you could go ahead
Yes.
for the benefit of those listening, say what those acronyms mean.
Yes, and I'm getting right into that, but thank you, Commissioner. Okay, just need to breathe a little bit. All right, so I have a general budget given to me by the county. Historically, collectors literally kept commissions off of everything they collected and funded their offices with that. It's no longer that way. We turn money over to the treasurer and have a regular budget, which is very wise in Clay County because 1% would be an extraordinary amount of money that we do not need. But we do also have an additional fund called the Tax Maintenance Fund. It is to be used only for expenses in the collector's office. It is not to substitute for normal budget for required items. It is for discretionary items, pushing the office forward, trying something new, software, education, things like that. And not really discretionary, but also emergency items. It can be used to supplement a need in a necessary line item, but then that should be addressed from a budget perspective going forward. So I will ask some about that while I'm here today. I also have a specific fund called the 305 Fund. When I started collecting for the cities, which is voluntary, by the way. There's a 1% commission required by state law. I asked for a split of that to help fund expenses in my office. The commission gave that to me, and so the 305 fund is, I believe, 1/4 of that 1%. The interesting fact is that whatever I get in the 305 fund, I also brought into the county as new money, brand new money that you would not have if I didn't collect for the cities. So just keeping that in mind. And the 305 fund is dual expenditure authority, and it is to be used specifically for technology. And that was the compromise with the commission at the time. They wanted to make sure that it was, just used appropriately rather than just money for any purpose. And so absolutely fine with that oversight, but we do need to discuss a little bit about its use. Okay, so specific budget line items that have issues. And I want to make it very clear that I am only here today to ask for increases with essential expenses, postage, armored car services, bank fees, things like that. You're never going to have me asking for office supplies, payroll, travel, anything like that, because that's what we would use the tax maintenance fund for if we had needs in that area. And we are very blessed in Clay County to have plenty for those purposes in that fund. But there are some things that either by statute or policy should be paid for by the commission, and we've been having some issues with that over the past few years. The first one is line item, it ends in 250, 100-505-250, which is reprographic services. It's a generic fund that we can use for a lot of purposes, but largely it has been used to pay our printer that prints all the tax bills and the delinquent bills and various things like that, and postage. And there has been a 25% increase in postage costs since I took office. I have not asked for a budget increase other than outside of a specific contract since I took office. Because there is a state statute that my budget cannot be cut, there's a historical policy that I don't ever ask for an increase. So that's fine, but it's getting a little tight over 10 years in these particular line items. So I do finally need to ask for a postage increase because this year we did pay $10,000 of postage out of the tax maintenance fund, and that is statutorily inappropriate. So that fund has historically been $80,000, and since there's been a 25% increase in postage costs, I'm asking for a 25% increase, which would raise that line item to $100,000. I believe that in all these line items that I'm asking for increases today, I would be more than happy to share historical expenditures, and I believe that the auditor would agree that these are not funds that I have ever used for discretionary items. These are not things that, because I do a lot of things in my office to push the office forward. I'm a creative office holder, but I don't use these line items for those things because these are required items. And I just gave the history of postage there on that page.
Steve Sirks for the budget team. Can I just
Yes,
ask
sir.
a question?
Yes.
Ms. Collector, are you talking about line item number 3 under 250, where there's currently 69,200 budgeted? Is that the one that you're asking to increase to 100,000?
Since my budget can't be cut or increased, I honestly haven't looked at those line items in years. I always just ask the budget team to roll my budget forward, so I actually don't know the sub-line items, and I apologize. I only know the main front numbers. So I can tell you this, I probably haven't looked at that specific line item in 8 to 10 years, because we just roll the budget forward every year and ask for the same amount every year. So I apologize, I don't know.
Well, I guess I'm just needing to know specifically what you're asking for, dollar-wise.
Does 69,000 say postage?
Say that again.
I'm sorry, does that line item say postage? The 69,000 that you referenced?
Can I just show you this? I'm going to approach the clicker real quick.
Absolutely.
This is what the specific of the budget shows. Have you seen?
Printing, nope, but that would be an excellent line item to increase. Yep.
But this is covering all that.
That would absolutely be the appropriate place to put it. And I do actually pay postage out of that too, even though it doesn't say that, but
So
yes.
you're asking that line item to be increased to 100,000?
The total line item for all of 250 to be increased to 100,000, so if you did that, we wouldn't need these others.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, sir, thank you. And feel free to continue to ask those types of details because I didn't go that deep in my proposal.
Can we, just for the sake of the recording and all that, I realize that it was loud enough and there was a mic on and all that, but could we just get a really quick summary of what the sidebar was about so that everybody's kind of up to speed? What the question was and what the answer was? Because while you guys were
Absolutely.
talking there, it might not have been heard by all who are listening.
Yes, sir, absolutely, Commissioner. Over the years, it appears that of the 80,000 that I was given in the generic overall line item, about 69,000 of that was allocated to a specific purpose, and then there were some other miscellaneous amounts. And so the budget officer asked me where the increase should specifically be. And so probably that $69,000 line item would be the appropriate place, but obviously I only need the whole line item to be 100,000. So also those miscellaneous items could either be rolled into it or whatever needs to be done to have the whole line item be 100,000. The purposes and uses of that fund are very similar amongst all the underlying line items, and so we haven't really had too much difficulty being allowed to pay bills appropriately out of any part of that fund.
Steve Sirks, budget consultant again.
Yes.
What I understand from Collector McAvoy is that that total line item for 250, she would like to see that increase to 100,000. Currently with line items number 1 and number 2 and 3 added up, that's $80,000 in total. So from what I'm reading, she's asking for an additional $20,000 to go into that line item. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And also for the sake of the public, if we wanted to post this at any point, if anyone had questions, I did actually give justifications under each of these with actual hard numbers of, what we're spending it on and that kind of a thing. So I'm more than happy to share that or have the clerk share it, however it needs to be shared with the public. My next item is actually just a question. As I understand it, department postage, which is internal postage, when we put something in a box, it has been a pass-through, and we have not been specifically charged those items. I just want to verify that that's still going to be true going forward, because as you see, they expected me to spend $90,000 this year, and we spent $117,000. That item is absolutely not discretionary. That's every single time somebody asks us to mail a receipt, if they need another copy of a bill, if we have to send out more tax sale notices than usual, whatever. That is not personal mail under any circumstances. That is all business related. And so I just want to make sure it's still a pass-through.
You're talking about 291. 291 department postage, that was,
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You can see that we used 110 this year, and they expected that we would use 117, and so, but then they still cut it back to 90 in the proposed budget. So as long as it's a pass-through, I don't need an increase. I just need to be able to make sure that I can put things in the mail and not get a bill that I can't pay. That's my only question. If it's still a pass-through, then I don't need that to be increased in my budget. But if it is, obviously, we need to meet the expected expenditures.
okay.
Okay, the next one is actually one of the most serious ones, and a tiny little bit of history. I try to keep it brief, but when I took office, so well before my time and in the first few years that I was in office, bank interest was used to pay bank fees, and then the excess was distributed to the taxing jurisdictions as additional revenue. And we generally have had excess because we collect a lot of money. When we switched to and UMB allowed us to sort of annualize that, and so we could carry a negative in the middle of the year, and they didn't really make it a negative, and then we were allowed to pay it up. Obviously, in December and January is when we get most of our revenue to that line item. But we did not actually carry a negative in the tax sale account. We simply had a negative on paper. Commerce did not let us continue that arrangement. They require the amounts to be paid every month, which is problematic for us because we have many months that are very thin. And so at that point, we went back to what the statutes actually contemplate, which is turning the interest over to the treasurer and then having an appropriate budgeted line item to pay bank fees. The problem was they had it come out of the bank fees and armored car fund, which is, we have $38,932 budgeted. Loomis alone costs almost $17,000. That's increased quite a bit since I took office, and it's nothing we can do about it. Gas is, I don't know why, but it's a contracted item through purchasing, and that's how much it costs. And then there was $78,444 in bank fees. We have multiple accounts. We have hundreds of thousands of transactions. We have enough bounce checks to keep you, awake for days. And so there's a lot of bank fees. And so obviously, we blew through that money. And what was very frustrating to me this year was in January of '20, we turned over $204,000 to the treasurer, and then they charged us like $10,000 into that line item, and that line item was erased by March. By March, we were paying Loomis and things out of the TMF, even though we had turned over $204,000 to the treasurer. So on an emergency basis, we have stopped turning it over to the treasurer temporarily until we knew we could speak to the new commission to get it right, because we needed at least whatever money we could keep to try to pay bank fees. We are currently $25,000 negative in the tax account, the actual tax account that belongs to the taxing jurisdictions. That absolutely cannot continue. That's essentially a trust account, and it should never run a negative. And if it ever ran a bigger negative, we literally could have difficulties distributing. Obviously, we're flush for distribution for right now, but that can't continue. So we need enough money to pay the bank fees, and there is more than enough interest to pay it. We just need to figure out the right way to handle it. So if we continue to pay it out of that line item, then just the bare bones expenses that it cost this year would be $95,000. And I've got that on here. That's just to pay exactly what we paid this year, and we paid $30,000 of that out of the tax maintenance fund to make it up. And then there's a $25,000 negative balance. So that's basically where the remainder.
Which line
is spent.
item are you referring to in your budget?
This is ending in 302,
Thank you.
100,505,302. So we collected 232,000 plus in bank interest in 2020, and we're well on our way to do that again in 2021. There is a statute that says you turn it over to the treasurer, and then we have a budgeted line item. Obviously, by concession of the commission, that's not how it was done when I came in. We used the excess and gave it out to the taxing jurisdictions, because again, it's a large amount of just found money, and so we were putting it to a public purpose by giving it to the taxing jurisdictions. And so obviously, as long as you, as the commission, would agree, that still meets the statute. You can check that with legal counsel if you wish. So I have some options here. First of all, we could continue to turn, or we could return to turning it all over to the treasurer and then get appropriate budget. The one issue I see with that is that bank fees can fluctuate wildly with very little notice and no control. Things when interest rates especially plunge or whatever, or if we go to a different bank, the county goes to a different bank, or the bank has some sort of a thing, they can fluctuate. And with the number of transactions that we have, okay. 297, yes, there you go, thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. Yes, oh, 297, okay, on my paper. Okay, well, anyway, I apologize for that. You're right, 297 it is.
Okay.
So, where was I? So bank fees can fluctuate wildly. So it would be, I believe, it'd be easier to allow the bank interest to accumulate and use it to pay fees, because they're often related. The amount of interest we earn is often related to the fees that the bank is charging. But there's still $154,000 over what the bank fees are in interest. The next item, the next option would be to keep the interest in the bank account during the year, and we could turn over the net to the treasurer at the end of the year after we paid the bank fees. Or else we could have a budgeted line item, but still then just give the extra interest over. The real benefit of that is the longer we keep that additional revenue in the tax account, the more interest it earns, rather than having to pay it out on a month's basis. This January, when we're going to get $200,000, we won't use most of that until maybe June or July. And so there would be additional revenue to the account. It also puts the found money to an appropriate public use by giving it to the taxing jurisdictions. I do have a third option I would like to discuss, though, and that is that a few years ago, the collector's office opted to subsidize debit card fees for taxpayers. We had excess funds, in my opinion, in the tax maintenance fund at that time. It is public money. I was literally looking for a public use, and so we did that, and taxpayers appreciate it greatly. I believe this is also something that the commission does for parks, and there is precedent in other counties where a commission will budget items for that. It's a very expensive line item. It was over $200,000 this year, and we are paying that exclusively out of the tax maintenance fund because, you know, we never asked for budget for it. It's fine. It would not be out of the question to roll that into this interest revenue line item because it is essentially a type of bank fee. So I've just given you some numbers there that you could look at, and I would greatly appreciate this option, but if you choose to give it out to the taxing jurisdictions, I certainly would not object, and we'd continue to use the tax maintenance fund. This is sort of a compromise because there isn't quite enough to cover it. So debit fees and e-check fees were almost $204,000 last year. The bank fees were $78,000, and then Loomis was almost $17,000. If you add that up, you're at almost $300,000, $299,200 in hard costs. Interest revenue was $232 and change. The budget we were given, so in addition to that, was almost 39,000. And so if we still got that same budget of 39,000 and we had the interest revenue on top of that, we would still be short almost $28,000, and we would be more than happy to cover that out of the tax maintenance fund. I'm always willing to share these types of things. It's just, we've really taken on quite the expense in that area. And so if we're going to have this additional revenue, I would like to consider having it made available. So this actually would not be budgeted as much as it would be known by the budget to be allowed to stay in the bank account and allowed to use for these fees. And there would obviously be accounting and very careful overview by the auditor on that, as there is now. I mean, they know what we do with the bank.
I do take your point on that, and I think maybe the way to proceed on that particular issue, and I'd like to get the other commissioners' input if they have something they'd like to say, and that is, it sounds like it might be a combination of budgetary certainly, but procedural. So I think perhaps the best thing to do is for you to get with the new administrator as soon as possible. Once he has his arms around it, then we can, as a commission, look at the procedure, and that is going to, I think, enlighten us as far as how we arrange it in budget. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, Commissioner, I would agree with you on that, and I think that sounds like a good plan to move forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, please, go right ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Collector. In terms of the tax maintenance fund, it's new to me, the concept. So could you help me understand what all it can be used for in terms of expenditures? You mentioned the debit card fees. Are there limitations on what it can be used for? And then also just how much is in the fund and how much is available in the fund to be used?
Yes. The statute is 52,285, I believe, somewhere down near the end of 52. And it's one of the broadest language funds that of all the various types of additional funds that the legislature has given to operating offices. And because the collectors fought for that, so that we had collectors enter into emergency situations in December, and then the school districts suffer. So it was, a very broad use. It lists, I believe, technology, education, and specifically states that you can use it to subsidize payroll, but then there is also a catch-all phrase that it can be used for any other purpose necessary to operations of the collector's office. And having just gone through a state audit with questions about this, what they always ask you is, what is the benefit to the Clay County taxpayers, first of all? And then it has to be used in the office of collector. There have been state audit findings for collectors being generous and giving the money to another office. I have helped with things like in the assessor's office, because if the assessor can't assess, I can't bill. It was still related to tax billing, though. We can't just, buy office supplies for the office or remodel anything. We really are actually not allowed to do that. So it does have to be directly related in some manner to the billing and collection of taxes.
Okay. And so you went through the audit process, and they were good with the way that we're using the tax maintenance fund?
They had one finding where they questioned my participation in a group called the National Tax Lien Association. It was about $6,000, I think, that had been spent on that. I felt I made a fairly good argument. I feel like National Tax Lien Association is rather related, but they disagreed and we left it out there. But it was a very small amount.
Okay.
To your point of how much is in there, I'd have to look at how much we collected this year, but I believe it can be as much as $600,000 or $700,000. It is a ton of money. It is. Here's the deal. I wouldn't have a dime in it if everyone paid on time. It is not tax dollars. It's not taken from any taxing jurisdiction. It is a portion of the penalty that you pay on delinquent taxes. So it stays the same every year, despite any efforts I make to try to help people, but that's where it comes from. It is not, we're not taking it out of the mouths or hands of any taxing jurisdiction.
Gotcha.
It is part of the penalty.
That's super helpful. Does it grow over time? You're saying 600,000 or 700,000. Is that accumulated year over year?
No, in different let me make sure I answer correctly. In different counties, it's handled differently. In a first-class non-charter county, which is up until this year, it is, I can retain up to 50% of it from year to year. And we've usually spent down to that and maintained about that much just for comfort level, at least about 200,000 in there as comfort level. We're down pretty low this year, but that would be due to, collecting taxes in a trailer and whatnot. It's very expensive. So we'll get back up there. I mean, I think you know, we're distributing 150,000 to it from December, and January will be many times that, because January is when taxes are actually late. December is from previous years. So
Okay.
it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And I have a list down when I talk about the 305 fund of the various hard expenses we pay with it. We have a lot of expenses in our office, and we pay them for that. So, but I'm also, and that's why I'm always more than happy to share things that are somewhat discretionary in my office with the commission, rather than coming and asking for them to completely fund that program, because we do have the ability to do it. It's just that this line item has really grown, and there does seem to be a line of revenue, so.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it's pretty discretionary in terms of, as long as it's related to the duties of the collector.
It
And
really is.
and does it represent a pretty significant portion of your overall budget?
It definitely has made it so that I haven't had to ask for a budget increase in 10 years. And we just started using it more and more. And yes, I mean, it definitely gives us a comfort level in our office, you know, absolutely. But there are hard expenses that come out of it, of, you know, way more than half of it every year, and sometimes even almost all of it. So I can go into those with you. But our multiple software products have annual maintenance fees of over 100,000, and we have multiple systems, so
Okay.
it goes pretty quickly just for that, and that's hard technology expenses. We also have used it for any travel and training and those kinds of purely discretionary items. We don't use it. The only training the commission has to pay for is my required training in Jefferson City. Other than that, any training I do, I always take the funds out of the tax maintenance fund. So, you know, anything discretionary like that, so.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so that's that line item and my proposal on that, and I'm open to, it's really kind of more of a policy discussion, wherever you would want to go on that. Okay, the next one is also a more serious line item that has resulted in an emergency in our office, and I have it ending in 508. Let me just make sure I'm right. Attorney's fees. I don't even, it is outside of 505, budget officer, and I can explain why. Once again, we have the gentleman's agreement that I can never get a budget increase because I can never get a budget cut, and so when I needed money, they decided to try to put it somewhere else so that it wasn't actually in my budget. And that's fine from a policy basis. As long as I have enough to pay the bills, it doesn't bother me. There's $50,000 budgeted in this 508 fund, and it is dual expenditure. It was dual expenditure with Lori Portwood. And it is to pay an attorney that has been designated by the commission to be dedicated solely to our office. Well, I mean, she has a job outside of it, but as far as her county services, to pursue delinquent taxpayers, personal property taxpayers. I have a statute that says I have to make best efforts. We're a first-class county. I think our best efforts are pretty robust, and she more than pays for herself, and that's what that line item is for. And it is exclusively used for her, and then a very small amount for what's called skip trace costs, which is once we get a judgment, try to find where someone is employed or a bank account so that we can garnish and actually collect the judgment. So those hard costs are just about $69,000 a year, and that's going to be a pretty steady number. She operates on a flat fee that was approved by the commission, regardless of how much she collects for us. Her flat fee is below the industry standard if we were to get the same amount of tax revenue collected by a collection agency, and I have that listed here. She is a fantastic collector that works for major corporations collecting debt, so she brings money in the door. She pays for herself many times over in tax revenue, but the amount of cash that we get to keep of that is very small, statutorily so. So the way it should work, the best way it would work, is the fees that we do collect through a tax bill, which, by the way, they go to a taxpayer with a line item that says attorney's fees. So in my humble opinion, they should absolutely be used to compensate for the attorney and not for any other purpose. And they are statutorily offered to be there. Those should go over to the treasurer, and then we should have an appropriate budget to pay. And in this particular case, she does not pay for herself in the fees she collects for us. She does more so than to the taxing jurisdictions, but the most she's ever collected that we've been able to keep is about $33,000. And it varies depending on how many cases she can get through the door and how many people pay. So it's about $30,000 that she brings in that can actually be used to pay her bills. So we had to pay about $24,000 this year out of the tax maintenance fund to make up her salary amount, and that's because they're still pending one more bill, because she is going to get the whole $50,000 out of the budgeted line item. Yeah, I don't know if those numbers, but anyway, maybe the bill is not going to be paid out of 2020 funds. So the best practice would be to turn over attorney's fees and then have this line item budgeted at about $69,119. And then we would just simply pay her invoice every month, which is exactly the same amount every month, and then pay her for the skip trace fees, which is exactly what we do. The only other thing she invoices us for is process server fees, and we are able to pass those through to a tax bill, so we don't need to, directly, so we don't need to budget for those. So that is really all I'm asking. And then also the dual expenditure, I would like to discuss that item. I have two funds that are dual expenditure. I have no,
Collector, before we
Yes,
move on, I
yes,
just
sir.
want to clarify.
yes,
There's $50,000 budgeted in the 508-209 line item.
okay.
And you're suggesting, I think in your document here and what you're saying, is that should be $69,119?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Absolutely. And so with regard to the dual expenditure, I absolutely have no problem with oversight for these types of, I call them sort of side funds or additional, the kinds of things. My request would be, and he's welcome to object if he would like it, but would be for that dual authority to go through the auditor or possibly the new county administrator. But we need to address timeliness. We are not paying these hard costs in any sort of a timely manner due to the dual expenditure problem. They get bogged down in that process. And so I have a feeling that'll already be better, but we probably need to designate who the new dual expenditure authority is, or take that function away, or, make it just made, or whatever. I'm fine with it.
But what you're talking about
Needs to be
is...
somebody that's on the ball.
Just to clarify, the dual expenditure authority is going to be, is traditionally listed in the expenditure authorities that are embedded in budget.
Yes, I believe there was a resolution or ordinance or something at one time allowing the 508. I know there's a specific ordinance that established the 305 fund, which I'm going to talk about next, and it established the dual expenditure authority.
Well, as
And-
far as because there are two different issues, are you saying that you're okay with the dual expenditure authority? You just need to know who it is.
Who it is, and my request would be, and maybe there will just be more commission oversight or more administrative oversight now, but that it be done in a more timely manner, where we have had...
Timely as far as as getting that person named, or timely in that the second expenditure authority is given? Are you talking about the timeline for the procedure of getting these paid, or are you talking about the timeline for getting someone named in that position? I just want to be clear.
No, the timeline of getting the bills paid,
Okay. That's
which
something
would
that, yeah. that's-
require a name as well, but...
Yes, far too many of them are designee. I would
Right.
like to see it, and that's something we will be discussing, obviously, in that. So I just want to make sure, so you're really not asking for any additional funding, you're just asking for a process difference. Part of that is going to be, first off, naming that person in our budget, which makes it appropriate for this discussion, even though it's not a monetary discussion, it is an assignment within those ordinances we'll be passing. So I just want to be kind of clear on where we were at on that. So what you're saying is, we should take into account when we name that expenditure authority, that it be someone who is able to turn it around in a more efficient manner than we have in the past.
Yes,
If I,
and I believe the purpose of the dual expenditure authority is oversight, so I'm happy with it being really anyone that, the auditor or the new budget administrator, whatever. It was the Assistant County Administrator for Finance Services, and I want to make sure and not disparage any purchasing staff or finance staff as well. The staff did fine, they just sat there for a long time, so we need that.
Mr. Auditor, I think you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in, currently that approval queue, we have administrator, and that can be, how the commission administrator wants to go. Sorry, I didn't say my name is Victor Holbert, Clay County Auditor. Sorry about that. I would just say one idea I could throw out there as far as timeliness, improving the quickness of payment to the vendor, is we could look at that, setting up the vendor by ACH, and that way, as soon as it gets through, we can pay them in 24 hours instead of, just waiting for a check to show up. So.
Well, and thank you for that, and I love that you're doing that, and we're definitely going to look at that once we have money to pay the bills again. But it wasn't a problem of cutting the check, it was a problem of the sign-off by the second authority. So that's really what I really am more than willing to have the transparency and accountability of a second signer. It just needs to be somebody that's going to be able to manage it in a more timely basis.
Well, I think those are good points, and I think this is something that I would also encourage you to have a conversation with the administrator with, and then the administrator will be in consultation with the commission, and we will act on his recommendations. I think that's probably our best way forward, but giving this information to the new administrator as well, I think will help us to be able to be advised by him on how to proceed more productively.
Absolutely. Thank you. The last item that I have is the three.
Before we
I'm
move
sorry.
on, could I just, we address something from the budget team, please?
Yes.
In talking about the 508 account, the question has come up, where do revenues come from that go into the 508 account? And I'd like to identify Chief Deputy Auditor Benjamin Pedersen to talk on that subject just a little bit, if we could, real quick.
Absolutely.
So just a question about clarification on revenue. Benjamin Pedersen, Chief Deputy Auditor. The revenue in 2017 in the 508 department, when it was created, it was designed to have revenues come in and expenditures out. And so there was a little bit of conflict on how much revenue went in and how much expenditure was allowed to go out. And so in 2017, there was about 90,000 that came in revenue. 2018, 165,000 of revenue. 2019, $3,800, and in 2020, zero. So I'm curious where those revenues are currently going. And so in order to put revenues in, how much revenues are we expecting and where's that coming from? And then what other lines maybe should be cut for revenues to put the revenues in this category?
I absolutely know why 19 and 20 dropped off, and I'll be more than happy to address that. I am surprised at the numbers from 17 and 18. I'd have to remember and look back because that's more than the attorney is collecting.
Oh,
So
please
there
speak into the microphone.
Oh, I apologize. There must be another source of revenue, which I'm very happy that there is to pay that, because I'm not asking for anywhere near that amount of money. But that also underscores the point that if we were bringing in those revenues in 17 and 18, the line item has been budgeted at 50,000. It has not been budgeted anywhere near the revenues we're bringing in, or even enough to pay the bills. So I don't know. Wherever it was coming, I'm sure it's still coming, and we probably just have redirected it. And I do know that that is exactly what has happened, again, on an emergency basis in 19 and 20. We have not been turning the revenues over in the same way we were because they wouldn't pay the bills. The bills were not getting paid. So I would like to return to that. I would like to make that very clear that under no circumstances do I want to continue. I think we directed those to the tax maintenance fund because we were using the tax maintenance fund to pay the bills. So, and that's, I just feel like the attorney's fee line item should go towards paying the attorney. And then if there's extra, that's fine. But it wasn't, we were not given appropriate budget, there was no sign off, and so we weren't able to pay the bills, so we've been redirecting it. So we'd be more than happy to direct that back through the treasurer to that revenue line item. And I'm sure whatever we collected in 17 and 18, we would collect again. So there must be another stream of revenue that I'm not remembering right this moment. So, but that is the answer to that question. And this is why I'm so glad to have this budget meeting. We have been on an emergency basis redirecting things that should be done appropriately. The problem is on the other side is there needs to be budget. And if we can just get appropriate budget only for the hard costs, then I'm more than happy, and it'll be much cleaner for the auditor's office and for our office to turn everything over appropriately, and I'm more than happy to do that. If we did not have the tax maintenance fund over the last couple of years, some significant functions would have just gone away. So.
Benjamin Pedersen, Auditor's Office, Chief Deputy Auditor. If you could get with us and just kind of help us refigure, make sure that our revenue figures are properly recorded. And our job in our office is to make sure revenue goes in the right place and then gets budgeted in the right place. So as we're making these adjustments, we'd like to make sure we're talking with you, communicating with you, and getting on the same page.
Absolutely. Obviously, there may be other line items that we redirected simply because we weren't having enough to pay the bills. So we definitely, whatever we were doing in 17 and 18, we're glad to get back. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And the last item is the 305 fund. So that was established with the cities, as I mentioned, and it generates approximately $215,000 in revenue a year. And that's pretty steady now. We've collected for the cities long enough to know that that's probably going to be a fairly steady number. And then the county gets an additional amount like that, that is just new money since we took on that responsibility. The 305 fund is also a dual expenditure item with the former ACA for finance. So We'll just need that new authority to be established and hopefully be able to establish a more timely process to get those bills paid. So now I have that list for you, John, and also for all of you to see. This is just off the top of my head, and this is just going through the tax maintenance fund. These are expenses that would absolutely fit squarely within the statutory mandate of the 305 fund, because it's very much supposed to be used on technology. It's much more limited. Converge One is the outside contractor used by IT, and when I say less COVID, we spent many times, I think we spent $170,000 with Converge One this year, but much of it was related to software efforts that we would not be repeating again. So I don't want to put those in there because the hard expenses were more around $60,000. Shamrock manages our imaging software, and that is an annual maintenance fee. Tipton does our cash recyclers, our currency counters, our software that reads checks and deposits the checks to the bank. And when I say less COVID, we also purchased some large items this year that there will not be recurring purchases. So that is $133,000 is the base that we use to maintain all of that software and that equipment. SHI is, I think, the contractor used by IT for any equipment, computers, printers, things like that. So that was our expense there. We probably have maybe 25 or 30 computers between the two locations and running to have ability for tax season, to operate a phone room and all those kinds of things. So, and they all had to be upgraded recently to a new version of Windows or something. So anyway, and that happens a lot with us. So we have to purchase equipment on a regular basis. And then Manatron is the historical name for our Ascend software company. And that cost is not only annual maintenance, but then they also come out for at least a week physically on site every year to try to get the assessor data to fit into the collector system. And so that alone is $341,000. And that's without even looking at, smaller technology expenses that arise and other smaller products that we have. So just to underscore that, there's only $215,000 in that line item. We'd like to use it for all these expenses, and then we still are covering a bunch with the tax maintenance fund. And so my point on this fund is also simply to budget it. It's not been budgeted. This year, they actually asked for $210,000, which was awesome, but many times, I think there was even a year where they budgeted zero, and then I had to come in November, once the revenues were known, and ask for it. And I understand in some way the reasoning behind that, but the revenues don't fluctuate that much over the course, and I don't mind you budgeting a little low, but the revenues don't fluctuate that much, and that's not transparent to taxpayers when you start out with a zero line item, and then I come in with an emergency request for over $200,000 at the very end of the year. That's not, we should budget it, and then we should do it. And if there needs to be an adjustment at the end of the year, that's fine. But would be much more transparent to taxpayers to know the amount that is brought into that fund.
Well, that's
and
been an
where it's
ongoing
used.
issue, is the communication between offices so that the information lines up, so it flows seamlessly from one office to the other without any.
Right.
So, yeah, at some future point, it would be good, I think, for us to visit on that, but that's something that's been ongoing that we probably need to address.
When the fund was first established, I remember having the conversation with Mr. Pedersen because he wanted me to kind of figure out a revenue amount, and I was like, I have no idea. But within just a few years, we did have a stable revenue amount that the commission could responsibly budget against. And again, if you budgeted a little low and I turned a little over, that's fine. I just want it properly budgeted from the beginning of the year so it's just available to spend, because the revenues are fairly guaranteed.
Okay.
Can I make a comment, please? Chief Deputy Auditor Benjamin Pedersen. I want to support Lydia in this. This has been a battle because it should have been budgeted as transfers out in general fund and then transferred to this fund. And so every year they would skip this and then should have to fight for it. So the budget team has talked about this and would propose some money to go there. In 2020, the amount of revenue in 305 was $205,000. So we would expect a little increase in 2021.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And just to piggyback off that, as I'm done, and my closing comments would be, I want to give absolute thanks to the Auditor's Office for working with us over the last couple of years. It has been very tough for us to not only pay our bills, but to pay them with the appropriate funds that we told taxpayers where we got the money. And they have allowed us, the latitude necessary to do what we've had to do. And I know they are on board with us getting back into full compliance, and I want to get back into full compliance. And so also, if there are discussions outside of my presence with them about any of these items, I wholeheartedly back anything that they have to say with regard to that, because my experience with Victor and Ben, or, with the auditor and Mr. Pedersen, have been, when they ask questions, it's a reasonable conversation. We can come to a reasonable resolution that allows me to pay my bills and allows them to have their paperwork. And so I have no complaints about that, and I'm happy to work with them to get all this right again. It's not the way it should be, and I want to get it back there.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and go to questions now. Commissioner Thompson, do you have any questions or comments related to this part of the budget?
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't actually have any questions for you. Some of these things we've kind of discussed and been over, and I've been aware of the problems, and I'm hoping we can get this straightened around. And I think it is important that you are able to pay your bills. So, and I know we've had an issue with that in the county over the past number of years, but I'm hoping we're going to get that straightened around.
Thank you. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have any comments or questions you'd like to go for?
I don't. I appreciate the presentation. It's been very helpful to me in terms of knowing, the best path forward, and if we can help shore up some of these necessary costs, I think we should probably do that, and look forward to working with you.
If I could make one last response, because I don't want to sound like an office that can't pay their bills, and when in light of the offices that have literally been, cut so badly that they could not. We do have the tax maintenance fund, and we are blessed, and I am more than willing to use it for expenses that come up. And so I don't want to make sure that if you look at these requests and for any reason they seem excessive or unreasonable, that is what the tax maintenance fund is for, and it is there, and it is appropriate. It's just these expenses that I came forward are more statutorily related or fundamental to the office, and so it would be appropriate. But I do want to make sure I don't come forward and sound to the public like when I have this huge fund, I'm begging for money, because we have been very blessed in the collector's office to be able to survive the last few years.
Well, one of the things that we've tried to do this year is to include in our budget team both the treasurer and the auditor's office. So the fact that you've had discussions with them really makes this process, I think, a lot more efficient, and it broadens the perspective that budget team is able to bring to these deliberations. So I'm really happy at the way this is kind of a side benefit that I hadn't really quite thought through, to the way that we are now seem to be working forward. With that, is there any question or comment from budget team about this area of the budget?
On behalf of the budget team, I do not believe we have any questions from Steve Sirks and the budget team.
Okay. If there are no further questions, if you have any other parting words, you've got about 5 more minutes in your time allotted, so you're certainly welcome to take
Never
that
short.
time.
I'm always over. No, I just greatly appreciate the opportunity to discuss these items, openly and fairly. And
Thank you
whatever you
again.
decide, we're fine.
We appreciate your time and look forward to working through some of these issues.
Thank you.
With that, we are a little bit ahead of schedule, but we may well end up needing that time at the end of the day. So if it's okay with everybody, I see it about 3 or 4 minutes before the hour of 2. We'll just go ahead and start with the clerk's department a few moments early, unless there's any objection. Yeah, please, just go ahead and have a seat right there, just like everyone else. Even though you're participating as the clerk, certainly in the budget part of it, you have your own little place at the table.
Well, the first thing I want to say, this is Sandy Baldwin, Clay County Clerk, which sounds kind of far out there for me. But I want to thank the budget team and the way we put the budget together this year. This is the first budget, and I think Steve Sirks would testify to this, that This is the first time in probably 10, 12 years that we've ever had a budget hearing like this, or even similar to this. And it's a very fair process. There's questions asked. It's just really, really helpful, both to the clerk's office and to each of you commissioners and to the budget team to have this kind of a talk and tell everybody what we need. Some people don't need everything, and some of us need everything we can get. And with that, I would like to start out with, myself, I've been with the county going on 15 years, and I've worked in the office for 14 years. Stacy Tingle has worked with the clerk's office for 12 years, and in those years, we have never received a pay increase, and 4 of those years, we've never received a COLA. And last year, due to the way the ordinance was written, people that only had money in their budget would receive a COLA. And of course, with the history, I could tell you a little history of the clerk's office. We have not had, we've kind of been put in the back seat for the last 6 years. And it was just because we have been doing our job and trying to do what was right. And of course, sometimes people, it just doesn't work out well at times. So we was kind of put down, and we was never allowed to get any extra money for any kind of training. And in 17, we had a $15,000 for a part-time vacant position, and they took that away from us in 17. And then in 2018, they tried to remove the chief deputy's position and reduce us down to $118,000. And with that, we had to let 2 people go.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, they, meaning the commission seated at that time?
The previous commission. And a lot of people does not know exactly what the clerk's office does, but we really do a lot in the county. We're just more than a glorified secretary. I've also, when you look at the packet, you can see some of the things that we do, but we really need help. We need some help. We need at least 2 employees, and I'm asking for a part-time position at $13 an hour just during the time of BOE, which is about 5 months. And this
could you go
year-
ahead and just mention when you use acronyms, if you could go ahead and define what those were for
Okay,
people
Board of
listening?
Equalization.
Right.
That's where people have a chance to come in, the taxpayers have a chance to come in and complain or try to get their valuation lowered. And we do have a lot of appeals during the year. Now, this year is going to be a reassessment year, and I understand that a lot of the land values are going up this year, which is going to hurt and which is going to hit a lot of commercial businesses. So I'm looking for a really big increase this year in our appeals. And under the way our office is set up now, it was all we could do to handle them last year. And I know it's just one little piece of paper, one of the previous commissioners had said, but that one little piece of paper can turn into anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour to process. And it's really a big deal. It's a legal function, and it's a serious function. And so I'm asking for a part-time person on that. And then I'm also asking for 2 new deputy clerks at $38,000 each, and I don't think that is out of reason because of the work and the responsibilities that the clerk has. And I think there's a commissioner here that can tell you that the clerk's office has a lot of responsibilities. And then I have an accounts clerk that I'm asking $42,000 for, and that is reasonable. When you look at the previous salaries of other people that has duties in the accounting area, $42,000 is really low for what some of the others are getting paid. And the chief deputy office, I'm asking $56,000. That still is lower than any of the other chief deputy offices in Clay County. But I think that she's going to be learning the chief deputy office, and I think $56,000 is a fair number for the responsibilities that that office carries. And like I said, I also put a little sheet of paper in here that shows you some of our deadlines. And this is most of the deadlines that we have. Sometimes there's other things that kind of scoot in with that over the years, but these are our deadlines, and this is actually what we do, a lot of what we do. So if you want to look those over, you can ask any questions about that. And then I also put an overview of each of the positions, the chief deputy clerk and both of the accounting clerk and the clerks up in the front, that, what we have to do. We probably, our phone lines, what would you say we get a phone call about every 4 to 5 minutes, all day long. And then we swear in notaries all day long. And that takes people away from, when there's just a few of us here, it takes people away from what we're actually supposed to be doing to go to the front desk and take care of taxpayers. Another thing, it's just, we just can't get everything done. I understand, we're taking back the sunshine request, which we've already had 11 this week. We did not have to pay a high-powered lawyer to have them done. I called
Go ahead and
Kevin.
explain just a little bit about what sunshine requests are, so those listening who might, need
A
to...
sunshine request is where a taxpayer has questions about the workings of the county. And like I said, we've had 11 this year. They were very, very easy. We have a real good relationship with our legal counsel. We had them done in a week, 11 of them. And I thought that was pretty good, because some of them were quite long, but we get them in and we get them out, and of course there was no cost to the county there. So you're looking at a savings of $60,000 in 1 month. So I hope you all will look over all of this, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to either call me, come by the office, or just ask me right now.
Thank you. A couple of things I want to mention. One is that often in transactions with the county, the clerk's office is the first point of contact, whether you're talking about a citizen making a sunshine request, which is when a citizen has a question about documentation that they would like to see, and of course the BOE process, whereby citizens have the ability to appeal the numbers on their property taxes. I think that's a very important function. So those are some of the things that are done through the clerk's office. Can you give us just kind of an idea of the actual number increase as far as the dollars go? Because that's obviously what we're going to be looking at, is what the, and you've given us a good breakdown on what each position is. And I think, you've given something that I've not really seen before, and that is a job description on these that allows us to know that if we're funding this position, what is entailed in that position, which I find very helpful. So could you give us just kind of an overall dollar figure of what kind of an increase you feel you need to have, and if you want to break that down a little bit more than that, I think that'd be helpful for us to get our minds around the numbers.
Well, one of the increases is, of course, the salaries. To get good help today, and I think we've got some good help in the office today, and if you don't take care of your employees, they're the backbone of your office. And they're willing to work on any project. They don't they don't tell me that that's not their area, they can't do that or whatever. But our increase this year has, like I said, we've increased quite a bit just in licensing. We went up in, I think it was 18, we had like $342,000 that we had collected in licensing. And in 19, I believe it was like $432,000. Of course, when you look at 20, it's close to that, but with the COVID, we don't have all of the money received in from licensing due to the COVID, and a lot of businesses are just struggling right now. So we really haven't been pushing that way on some of the businesses. We've sent out second notices, and we're just not pushing the business owners like you would if it was a good year. but we've never had a problem collecting our money. And I might add, this is the first time that anybody's even asked about it. We've always turned in our finance to the budget team, and our office is the only office that has never entered a dollar amount as to what we take in. And we normally take in about $432,000 a year in our office, which is never shown in any of the auditors' reports or any of that, or even when we have a budget, they do not show any kind of a revenue line.
I think with that, I'll go ahead and I don't know that there's any doubt whatsoever that the commissioner with the most knowledge on this area would be Commissioner Thompson. So Commissioner, do you have some questions or comments that you would like to put forth?
Come on.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't really have a whole lot of questions. I can honestly say that looking at this, I know where the needs are in the clerk's office.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed them myself, and, you know.
It's been a struggle.
It has been, and I won't lie. And I'm glad to see that you guys are asking for the training for Eden and the 1099 training, because that is very important for the county, especially with handling all the accounts payable for the whole county, and then they handle all the 1099. So to stay up on that is very important. And there was times, remember, we were scraping our pennies, just trying to stay in compliance. And I will say the clerk's office has never actually attended the actual Eden conference, which I think would be very beneficial.
Could you go ahead and explain a little bit of what Eden, so I'm not sure the people listening are going to know the name Eden, because it is obviously something that's a little inside baseball. So if you just give the folks watching and listening some kind of basic awareness.
Yeah, no, the Eden software is the software within the county that all accounts have, everything that goes through this is paid. And there's one person who's inside the clerk's office who, any expenditures throughout the county, it'll go to them. And they have a lot of approvals that go through there, and they're the record retention area for these. There's a lot that goes into it and staying up to date with it. So I think it's really important to seeing what new changes are being made within the software. It coordinates directly with our treasurer and our auditor and the other departments. There's a lot that goes into it. So I'm glad to see that they're going to be requesting that this year.
And I did bring in Stacy Tingle. She's going to be the chief deputy, and she has been doing the accounts payable. And I would like for her to tell you some of what she deals with, and what the 1099s and about the Eden training that we have not been able to go to.
Please speak into the microphone.
I can speak to the accounts payable position. And I think that we all know the increases in expenditures over the years has made the workload steadily increase in that department. And then as far as the 1099 training, I think it's invaluable to the county. In 2012, there were some errors made, and the county did incur fines of $10,000 to $12,000 for errors that were made in not sending out correct 1099s. And there hasn't been funding for training, and it needs to happen. It's hard to stay abreast of all the IRS changes without attending a training. Like this January, there are new changes, and the Eden software was updated because there are changes, and there's no training that we were able to attend. It's just something that we have to kind of figure out. So that's what I'd have to say about that.
Commissioner Carpenter, any questions or comments?
Just a brief comment. Look forward to getting the budget up to where it needs to be, and I really appreciate the presentation and the information that you provided. I think honestly it can perhaps serve as a model going into future years in terms of what we request from folks in terms of changes that they want to their budget and justifying increases in expenses. I think the breakdown's super helpful, and appreciate taking the time to do it. And y'all have done lots of important work in recent years, and I think there's every reason to make sure that we right-size things and make sure you can adequately fund the office. So look forward to doing that.
I might add one other thing, that the clerk's office does work with every department in the county. And when any member of the county department heads call, we try to help them out because we know that they're in the same, they're trying to get stuff done and try to get through everything as quickly as they can. So we try to do everything we can to help everybody in the county. And training is really a big deal. Salary's a big deal. I know we're kind of hurting this year, but the clerk's office has never had anything for the last 6 years, and really we could go even farther beyond that. And the money that we are asking for, I think, when you look over the last 6 years, what we're asking is not far-fetched. And by the way, we're not asking for any consulting services this year. So I thought I'd throw that out there. Thank you so much.
Just one more thing
Oh,
about
go
the
ahead,
accounts payable.
Identify yourself, please.
Stacy Tingle. The accounts payable position, as I was saying, as the expenditures increased over the years and our staff decreased, I mean, we were able to keep on time, make timely payments, but there are other areas that have been lacking over time. The vendor maintenance needs to be done, which would, show the importance of additional positions to help the clerk's office get back up to where we really need to be to function properly. So.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the budget team?
I'll just echo from the auditor's office. This is Victor Hurlbert. The request for the Eden trading, I think, is important just because it's for that accounts payable duty. It's kind of the lifeblood of that, and so I think it's very important. So I'll just add that.
Just like to make a comment from the budget consultant, Steve Sirks, that in my former employment with the sheriff's office, I would have to contact and interact oftentimes with the clerk's office. And even though they were short-staffed and understaffed, if I needed something, they got it for me or provided me the information. And in fact, I used to joke with Stacy a little bit about her being old dependable because she was always there even up to 5 o'clock every day. So they've done a magnificent job as far as I'm concerned with what little resources they had. So I commend them for what they've done, and I think that they make a good case for what they're wanting to do.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Benjamin Pedersen, Chief Deputy Auditor. I got to agree too. Clerk's office needs more funding. And so I know we're kind of all on the same page, but I wanted Sandy to know that I supported her.
Well, we work hard, I think. Thank you so much.
Well, one other thing I want to point out before we leave, and that is that, again, under our new constitution with our former clerk becoming now our commissioner, that has triggered the constitutional transfer of power or transfer of the office under the commission or under the administration. And I just want to make a comment that while we're talking about increases here, the hope is that we could identify a number of duplications to where we're not, the increases that would be going into this particular office would be offset by the lack of duplication and the merging of the sort of parallel efforts being made for the same mission. So I think that while there's a request for an increase, I think it should be noted that those increases are going to be offset by cost savings elsewhere. So I think this is going to be a very good change for this county and for both the clerk's office and the administration.
Well, one of the offsets would be your sunshine request.
That is true.
As long as everybody does their job and does it right, you're not going to have to worry about how you answer that request.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate the hard work done by the clerk's office coming and bringing us to this point. And like I say, it will, I think, allow a more close working relationship between the administration and the clerk's office. And I think that is nothing but good news for taxpayers.
Definitely. Thank you.
Any further from the commission?
Just one, I'm sorry.
Oh, go right ahead.
Just one of the comment from the budget team. I just wanted to make a clarification. You're not asking for any other increases in your line items and office supplies or educational and training supplies or anything at this time?
No. We'll work with what we have.
All right, thank you.
We just want more money for the people, and we want some training.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Very well. Unless there's any further comment, thank you for your input. It is now about 18 minutes after the hour. Our next Our next is a 2:30 appointment. If we're ready to go forward with that, we might do that as long as everybody feels ready. Is there any indication that we want to take any kind of a break, or is everybody ready to keep kind of forging ahead? I see no one indicating they'd like to take a break at this time, so we will go ahead and start on the highway portion of our hearings. And what I'd like to say is as we go forward, the way we've been doing this is, since we are doing both audio and live streaming, it would be helpful if whoever is speaking identifies themselves and their department, and that if we can go ahead and go through what some of your requests are, and yours go over multiple chapters, so it's kind of your call whether you want to go through one section and then do Q&A with the commission and budget team, or if you'd like to go through the whole thing. I can go either way. I'm just going to kind of leave it at your discretion because you know the material, of course. So if you'd like to proceed with your name and also give us a little, although highways is kind of obvious, it's one of those, what does a highway department do? Highways. But go ahead and give us some background, particularly for those who are listening and who may not be familiar with all the departments, a little bit of background on what the department does and how they function.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Terry Griffin. I'm the Highway Administrator for Clay County. This is Stephanie Walters, Administrative Assistant. As you said, the Highway Department function is somewhat obvious, but we are responsible for the maintenance and repair of roads and bridges in unincorporated Clay County. This includes 377 linear miles of roadway and associated right-of-ways and infrastructure, which serves the residents of Clay County. Our infrastructure, in addition to the road mileage, includes 68 bridges, about 270 concrete box culverts, 1,650 under-road culvert tubes and other drainage structures, and 6,000 warning, directional, and regulatory signs. The Highway Department is responsible for maintaining all of the chip seal, asphalt, and gravel roadways. We do bridge and culvert maintenance. We GIS map and update and maintain infrastructure records on each discrete component of our infrastructure. We maintain and repair equipment and vehicles, not just for the Highway Department, but for other county departments as well. We provide a fuel system for the Highway Department, the Sheriff's Department, and other county departments. And we do a variety of other projects or items as well. We have about 30 staff members, ranging in tenure from just a few months to 35 years of service with the county. All of our staff members attend training classes and update their knowledge and skills continuously to make sure that we're current on technology, new processes and procedures and so forth in the industry. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to present the budget or proposed budget for the Highway Department. We will cover, there are two main areas where the Highway Department has funding. One is the 220 Road and Bridge Fund, and the other is the 301 Use Tax Fund. As we made the budget presentation or proposals earlier last year, we were instructed to reduce our budget request from the year from what was initially requested. And we understand that there is a need to reduce planned expenditures to match anticipated revenue. And of course, like every department, we would prefer not to have budget cuts, but it is part of what has to be done. We do, however, feel like any budget cuts or increases, as the case may be, should be fully transparent and that expenditures need to be planned from appropriate accounts. In November, the Highway Department was instructed to reduce our planned expenditures, our proposed expenditures. We were told to make these cuts using numbers supplied to us in several accounts that used some expenditure numbers from 2020 approved budget, some from actual expenditures in 2020, and some from a 3-year average number. After the cuts were made in the 220 Road and Bridge Fund, we were instructed to move $1.2 million in planned expenditures to the 301 Use Tax Fund. The email that we got regarding this budget, the final budget as proposed mentioned a modest increase in the highway use tax fund, which was the $1.2 million just mentioned. However, what that memo failed to include was that $3.1 million had been removed entirely from our proposed 220 budget. Overall, that's a reduction of $2.2 million in funds between those two accounts for the Highway Department. To further obscure what expenditures were moved or eliminated during that process, all of the expenditures that were moved from the 220 Road and Bridge Fund to the 301 Use Tax Fund were thrown into a single line account in the 301 fund. So the 301 820 340 Road Construction Materials account, rather than being fully transparent, now contains a number of items that are not road construction at all. Some significant items which will now need to be paid from the 301 Road Construction Materials account include equipment lease payments, equipment repair parts, box culvert replacements, fuel for highway, sheriff, and other departments, and salt and sand for winter storms. The overall reduction in proposed expenditures will of necessity require that the Highway Department reduce our road surfacing processes or plans for the year, and it may affect other repairs throughout the year and limit the number of failing box culverts that we can replace. The reduction in budget available for equipment repair parts may limit what repairs can be made, not just for the Highway Department, but for other departments that rely on the Highway Department to maintain and repair their vehicles. The reduction in funding for fuel may become a cause for concern, not just for Highway, but for the Sheriff's Department and other departments as well. With all that in mind, I ask you to consider our budget, and while we are willing to make cuts, as I said, to reduce expenditures to meet expected revenues, we would respectfully ask that some changes be made to the way the budget is lined out so that it is much more transparent and so that it becomes apparent where the commission intends for the Highway Department to spend our funding. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions or any concerns that you have.
I think the first thing that I have some concerns about was the moving of monies from one line to another. And I think I'd like to go ahead if I'm sure the budget team has been looking at that and is aware of some of that. Before we get into other questions more specific, are there any questions or comments related specifically to the transfer, which sounds to me to be unprecedented before as far as budget on the highway goes?
Yes, I've not seen that in the past.
Or for any other department. I mean, that doesn't even ring a bell with other departments right off the top of my head, that it would have that kind of a massive switch in where funds were placed. Does the budget team have any thoughts? Yeah.
I'll go ahead. Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. I'd just say in an overall general picture, I believe the reason for that, I understand you're noticing your total budget, there is certainly a cut from 220 to what was moved to 301. But I believe the reason that was done, I can't speak for, the emails you referenced, was just a cash issue in Fund 220 as far as where we ended up. And so they tried to shift it to where there is money in 301. That's, in a very simple way, would be my understanding.
Right, I understand that the revenue, the expected revenues for 2021 for each of those two funds changed from what they were in 2020. And I do understand that those adjustments have to be made with that in mind. But I am also concerned about why expenditures from various accounts were all dumped, if you will, into this one account, in the 301 account. It makes it very difficult for us to be clear about what we're expected to spend and where it's being spent.
And I would just say, Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor, back on to that point, I think that's something, we appreciate your concern, and I think that's something we can take into consideration as a budget team and as the accounting office to look at, balancing the budget, but also, yes, reflecting, due to the concern of transparency, how can we most reflect those shifts of costs? We will take that into consideration, so we appreciate that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Any other comments from on this particular, then we'll go back. It's just that one kind of stuck out, so I wanted to address that one as a specific, almost standalone kind of item in this particular budget talk.
I'd like Chief Deputy Auditor Benjamin Pedersen to talk about a subject real quick related to this.
Thank you.
Benjamin Pedersen, Chief Deputy Auditor. One of the things that I want to point out is the struggle that we will have in meeting the needs for highway. Additional to the cuts that were in the proposed budget, the final cash carryover figure shows that cash was a lot lower than was proposed. 220 ended up with having cash of just under $4,000 at the end of the year. The projection was over $690,000, so that would mean that we've got additional issues of $690,000 just in Fund 220. Either additional revenues are needed or additional cuts would be needed. So those are some things. One way that the proposed budget was accounting for this was shifting costs over to Fund 301. And so if you have extra cash in 301 in our use tax fund for highway projects, then those costs could be shifted over to that fund to cover that. Once the true cash carryover came in for Fund 301, it was overstated by $942,000. So that means we have additional concerns and things that we need to address in Fund 301. So the net is over $1.5 million of shortfall in cash that was budgeted in the proposed budget. So once again, in order to make the balance for what the proposed was, there has to either be reductions in cost or new revenues to make that budget balanced to the proposed.
Obviously, we're in a lot more serious situation than I think any of us had thought at the outset of this. The numbers were not
Well, I was going
typically
to say,
accurate.
those carryover numbers are a surprise to me as well. So.
Yeah, they surprised a lot of us. Okay,
If
so
I-
anyway, I want
Commissioner,
to go to, yes.
If I might just say, just an added comment to what Chief Deputy Pedersen was saying. When we started looking at the overall county budget, because of the underestimation of the cash carryovers, we were about $2.7 million in the red. And so we have been meeting as a budget team now for a couple weeks and trying to come up with some solutions to balance those. So I think we're pretty close to getting where we need to be. We're certainly not looking, for the most part, to try to add any more expenses to the current budget. And in all likelihood, some departments will have to have their budgets reduced even more than what was in the proposed budget to make it balanced, because we obviously cannot produce a budget that is in a deficit. So that's kind of we're kind of behind the 8 ball on that. And I just want everybody to know that up front, that we're not in a real good financial shape yet, but we're trying to work toward getting to make sure that revenues meet expenditures, or will support expenditures. So that's kind of the challenge that we of the budget team have had. So I just wanted you to be aware of that
Thank you.
we're looking at everything. So, thank you. Steve Sarks for the budget team.
Yes, absolutely, go right ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Carpenter.
Thank you. So this question is for Ms. Griffin or anybody from the budget team or fellow commissioners. Well, 2 questions. One, how much of the percentage-wise of the budget comes from dedicated revenue sources as opposed to the general fund? And then 2, what is the explanation for the $1.5 million estimate being off, and the dramatic shortfall, especially if a lot of these are dedicated funds where I would think it would be pretty easy to anticipate the amount of revenue that would be expected to come in from them? And that's genuinely for anybody who feels like they have a sense of either of those. And I'm happy to clarify too if that needs clarification.
I'll jump in. Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. I'd say, dedicated revenues to Fund 220, you have your property tax, highway property tax, like 0.0766 is what it's currently at. There's that. And then there is a sales tax, general fund sales tax allocation, county sales tax allocation that's given to highway. It also gets some motor fuel sales tax revenue from the state. That's a big revenue there. There could be some grant monies in Fund 220. And obviously, Fund 301 is just use tax dollars. So to answer that point, as far as the question of,
So, and 301 is exclusively use tax dollars?
yes,
Okay. And then the majority of 220 are revenue sources that are dedicated to 220?
well, we'd have to, I would say most of that is the property tax is for that fund. It would exceed the sales tax allocation by quite an amount. Now, a good amount of that budgeted in our road district payments because of the settlement agreements has to be trued up to 14 cents, and then we, make payments off of that, and as well as collector settlements revenues for that component. But as far as the cash picture, I would just say, largely overspending, and yeah, probably not a good, with the carryover projection was just maybe a little behind where the spending ended up at the end of the year. Does anyone, Benjamin, would you like to add anything to that assessment?
Benjamin Pedersen, Chief Deputy Auditor. The revenues that are dedicated to Fund 220 are budgeted to be approximately $5 million. And then general fund will allocate sales tax of almost $2 million. So the budget is just under $7 million of revenue. Since carryover is zero, that's kind of where there's been some cash carryover in previous years to be able to add to the budget to make more projects available. Some of the things that we just don't know how some of the grant money was budgeted in the previous year. So that inflated revenues, which allowed for an inflated expenditure, the expenditures happened, but not the revenues, so it ended up eating up cash carryover. So that's probably the main reason why we are where we are today, is some of those bridge projects that had the expenditures budgeted and spent, but didn't have the revenue come in. So we need to maybe have some conversations about that to see if maybe there are some future revenues in 2021 that we can get to put in the budget to help balance this. So that's one option and one way that we can look at this. But the dedicated revenues, like Victor was sharing, is about $5 million.
Okay. And so has there been a reduction in the amount of grant money we're getting? I mean, is that part of the issue? And again, for Ms. Griffin or anybody, because it sounds like the dedicated funds should be pretty reliable, right? Like we should have a pretty good sense of how much is going to come in. There shouldn't be dramatic year-to-year shifts in those numbers. I wouldn't think, but if I'm wrong, I'm happy to get clarification. So basically what I'm trying to understand is not only how do we resolve this year's shortfall, but how do we sort of prevent this from happening again in the future?
Benjamin Pedersen, Chief Deputy Auditor. The correct answer, or the answer for the dedicated funds, you are correct. Those are pretty steady and maybe have a slight increase. So we haven't seen any huge hits in that. So it could be, I'm estimating or looking at it and thinking it's the grant issue. How we get the grant issue fixed, I have a number of ideas on that. I would propose we have a grant position in the county to have somebody that manages grants to track them for us, to help all the different program managers who are in charge of all kinds of daily activities. They should have somebody helping them be in compliance with grants and to help us figure out how much to budget each year, how much is available to spend. So how we go forward, we need to better manage our grants. That's one area that I would look at. And in this year, it's going to be a tough year for our highway projects, and we're going to have to just take a hard look at it. And as a budget team, maybe have discussions to see what kind of things we can do and see if there's any creative ways that we could propose getting done what needs to get done this year.
Okay.
Terry
Thank you.
Griffin.
Yep.
I'd also like to make some clarifications on the grant funds for highway. Those, of course, are primarily due to bridge reimbursements from MoDOT, and those were down dramatically this year because we had two bridges that are probably $1.7 to $2 million apiece that they went out to bid in April, right at the height of the pandemic, so to speak, or early in the pandemic, and we had absolutely no bidders on those. And at MoDOT's recommendation, we went back to the drawing board and asked the engineering company to do some redesign to both of those bridges. Those designs have finally been completed, and so those bridges, which were anticipated to be built and partially reimbursed in 2020, the funds were not spent, although the funds were supposed to be spent out of the grant or out of the bond money, not out of the regular accounts. And so there was no grant reimbursement for those because there was no bridge building. Both of those bridges will go out to bid by the end of the month and will open at the end of February. So hopefully we will get both those bridges built using bond funds to spend them, and they should be partially reimbursed from MoDOT as we go through the construction.
When you're referring to bond money, Commissioner Nolte here, when you're referring to bond money, are you talking about the COP bonds?
Yes, sir.
And how has this impacted the BRO funds, which is, I think, what you were just referring to, bridge replacement funds? My understanding was we had at one time a substantial amount of money built up in that. There was some concern expressed, and I've not seen it addressed necessarily regarding the idea that we may that money may well end up being lost, which is money that I might be too strong to say earmarked for Clay County, but certainly ours to be able to work with. What is the state of that bridge replacement fund, and how do we use that going forward?
Well, the BRO program is a reimbursement program that is funded through Federal Highway and MoDOT. And it's a reimbursement program, not a payment up front, but once we build a bridge that's BRO qualified, MoDOT will reimburse us 80% of the cost of engineering and construction on the bridge. Over the years, there have been fairly consistent conversations from MoDOT saying that if you don't use the BRO funds that have been allocated to the county, they'll send them to someone else. I've never seen that happen. Right now, we have just over $3 million in BRO funds, but the two bridges that will bid by the end of February will more than use that BRO allocation. So there's really no danger that we'll lose those particular reimbursements.
Okay, that's good to hear. The other thing I was wondering about was the COP bond money that is being used is outside of our regular budget process.
Yes.
Those were monies that would not, so what we would be funding, say, in this budget, any monies that you would be getting from the COP fund would be in addition to the funds that we would be talking about allocating.
That's correct, and our budget does not include any bridge building in the 220 or 301 funds that we're discussing today. That's correct.
Okay, so how much money do you anticipate getting from the COP for this year coming up? Well, the current year, I should say, the 21 budget year.
We have the two bridges that I mentioned that will go out to bid soon. We have a third bridge that we hope will be ready to go out for construction by early summer. If all three of those bridges can be built before year end, we're talking close to $7 million probably, if not a little more, that will be paid from the COP fund.
Okay. Who is the entity who's doing that work? What company?
Right now, WSP USA are designing the bridge on 188th Street and 148th Street, and Great River Engineering is doing the design on the Greenwood Road Bridge.
And how is one of the other things is that on these kind of projects there are cost overruns. What's the history on cost overruns with these entities? Because if we budget for a certain amount, there are some companies that just frankly go over, and they ask for more payments because of whatever. Sometimes I fear when that happens, it happens because there was not quite enough work done up front by some of these companies to understand what they're getting into. So I guess what I'm interested in is to make sure that if we get a bid on a bridge, that it stays close to and does not exceed it by a substantial amount of money. And I understand that may well have happened in years past. So I was a little concerned about that particular issue.
Of course, that happens from time to time with any entity that's bidding construction projects. As far as the engineering is concerned, I don't expect any cost overruns on engineering, and until we get the bids in for the bridges, I can't say anything one way or the other about construction. I will say the bridges that WSP is designing, this is the first time that we have worked with WSP, so I can't speak to their track record with the county. except to say that they have been pretty consistent with the prices that they've given us.
And I'm thinking more in terms of construction. You're right, I kind of was
Right.
taking down the wrong path there a bit.
I would say we've worked with Great River Engineering on several projects in the past, and their construction estimates have been adequate, or generally pretty close to what they should be, and we've had very few cost overruns on engineering with Great River.
Something else that used to be done, and I've not seen it for some time, and I understand that with change of administrations, things change as far as how information flows. But at one time, I remember seeing a 10-year plan that was a plan on, excuse me, how it is that we are looking to, in other words, we're talking about building 2 bridges in, say, 2021, another in 22, 2 more in 23. There was kind of a plan going forward, and I think it extended to a 10-year program. Is there anything like that right now that exists?
There is nothing on paper. We have a list of bridges that we know need to be replaced and so forth. And part of the reason, or part of the difficulty in determining any type of a construction schedule or a replacement schedule on bridges is the same thing that's happening here today, and that is funding. And that is, it's difficult to say from one year to the next what funds will be available for bridges. The COP funds have helped tremendously, or will help tremendously as we get into building bridges in terms of how much can be built. But it's challenging since we don't, and then also the funding, the BRO reimbursement funding from MoDOT is allocated on an annual basis, and there are no guarantees how much those funds will be, or if they'll even exist. I mean, because that's dependent on federal highway determining to continue the BRO program.
So I'm sorry, if I've got the number, what was the number you're anticipating in 2021 from BRO funds for highway construction or bridge construction?
Right now, we have just over about $3.5 million in BRO funding available.
I mean, on the COP funding.
Oh, on the COP funding, we're hoping to have close to $7 million. Now, the reason I use that number is that most of those funds were originally set aside, if you will, for the highway department to use for bridge funding. So
And I guess the
that's
reason I'm
where
saying
we
that
are.
is that is $7 million that is outside of what we will be budgeting.
That's correct.
On top of whatever, and granted, we're in a tough spot here, but I realize that bridges and roads are expensive, but $7 million is a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
As far as, yeah, I guess I could get deeper in the weeds on that, but I think we need to stay with the funding part of it. So obviously, since you're getting what appears to be new information on our financial situation, it may well be a thought that you would need to, I mean, I'm sorry that you were caught rather by surprise, but it's something that's certainly we have to take into account. While I've never been a fan of the COP, either the mechanism or many of the projects funded, at least when it comes to roads and bridges, we're talking about something that is part of the basic mission of government, which is to provide safe transportation venues. So, I mean, I have a lot less heartburn about the actual use of COP money when it comes to that, as opposed to, say, a nature center. So I have a lot more sympathy for that. I do have my apprehensions all the same, but let's go ahead and move it along to some of the others, but those are some of the things that I want to make sure that we are taking advantage of. I guess the last thing I'd like to say is I'd like to see more participation with Mark. It seems that working through the TTPC, which is the Total Transportation Committee at the Mid-America Regional Council, and also the Surface Transportation, it seems like we might be able to use that as one venue for acquiring grants. They seem to be the gatekeepers on that. Up until recently, I was a member of both those committees, but the last commission saw fit to take me off of those committees. I think that's something that we need to, as a county, be participating in and getting our fair share of what there is out there in grant money. So I totally agree with the idea that having a grant writer to be would more than pay for that position itself many times over. But once again, we seem to have been somewhat missing in action when it comes to those two rather key committees. And I'd like to see us participating a lot more. There's a lot of money that gets left on the table. Our municipalities are participating in that, and they seem to be able to walk away with a reasonable amount of money. I will go back to my usual observation, and that is we in Clay County and the Northland are not getting our fair share many times in those occasions. I think it's more than past time for us to be able to go in and start fighting for those dollars, especially when we're talking about something as basic as transportation infrastructure. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just want to thank you guys for coming in today. I really do appreciate it. And some of this is kind of eye-opening for me as well, since I don't have really had a lot of experience with the road and bridge portion of the county in my previous position. But it is very important to me to make sure that we do have functioning infrastructure, and that is our roads and bridges. And we do have some issues throughout the county, and I'm aware of this. And I want to make sure that we can fund them. I know we're kind of bumping into some issues from our past administration, and I'm hoping we can all get together with the budget team, kind of get through some of this. And yeah, I think there is probably some money that has been left on the table in the past, but I want to make sure that we can properly fund some of these spots. So I'm going to thank you guys for coming in, and I don't really have any questions. I'm just kind of absorbing it and seeing where we can find some money to put back in some spots. So thank you.
Just very briefly, thank you. So in terms of the $7 million figure, was there money, COP money, that you all received in this previous budget year as well?
My understanding is that the COP funds are a bucket that's not allocated annually. They're just there.
So
and
7 million
available
is
for
the
use.
total
Yeah,
for highways?
Right,
Okay.
yes.
So if you were to do the bridge projects and they totaled $7 million, that would then be,
That would be
That would
all
be
of
it.
the money that has been allocated from the COP to the highway department.
got it,
yes.
okay, no, I appreciate that. And is it money that otherwise y'all would have spent out of the budget money we're talking today, or is this going to create projects that would not have been done otherwise?
There would have been no way that we could do, well, it would have been extremely difficult for us to have done the projects without the COP funds, simply from the standpoint that we don't have another $7 million. We didn't in the 2020 budget, we didn't in the 2019 budget, and we don't in the 2021 budget. So it's a bonus for the highway department to be able to finish those bridges. And that's not to say that there are not additional bridges that need attention almost as badly as the ones that we're talking about today, but there's obviously, we stay with whatever funding we have available.
Yeah. And then final question, in terms of, hiring somebody to oversee grants, it may well make sense to do that, have a countywide person for that role. I assume you all in the department, though, have people on staff who apply for grants for funding. Is that?
Yes, the bridges are basically the only thing that we apply for is the BRO funding. Now, Commissioner Nolte mentioned funding that's available through MARC, through STP or TTPC. Those are potential sources of funding for bridges and roads throughout the county, but it would take someone with specialized knowledge that we, at the present time, don't have at the highway department.
In terms of how to apply to MARC for the grants, or?
No, in terms of preparing the grant itself.
Right.
Most of the projects, as I understand it, at MARC, in order to apply for funding, the engineering needs to be either completed or well underway before that can be done, which of course means the county needs to put some money up front in order to get those grants, the projects to the point that you can apply for MARC funding.
Okay.
But again, a grant specialist who could wade through that with us and help us figure that out would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there a reason the highway department hasn't invested in hiring a grant specialist like that on its own in previous years?
Money. There's a limited amount that we have dedicated for staff, and we spend most of it every year, so.
Okay, but you said you have about 30 employees, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And okay, all right, I appreciate it. Thanks.
By the way, Commissioner, just to clarify on the grants, they are competitive grants, and generally in the application process, you list a number of attributes attached to the project, some of them applying to just usage, some of them applying to considerations for more green infrastructure. But essentially, it is a point system, and then it's a matter of going through there. So it's not what has been referred to in the, there seem to be two kinds of grants. The entitlement grants, to where if you just get in first and you qualify, you get it, whereas these kinds of grants are competitive grants, so it's not first come, first served, but whoever has the highest point system is generally going to be able to attain those grants. So it's a little bit different and a little bit more strenuous than the usual.
Yeah, my understanding of the MARC grants, I've sat in on some of the meetings at MARC for STP or TTPC, and my understanding is those are highly competitive grants, and if you don't, it's based entirely, they use different criteria for different grants, of course, but as Commissioner Nolte said, if you don't have enough points, you don't get the money.
Well, I appreciate the information and the clarity, I really do. It seems like if an analysis can be done that shows whether or not whether we would expect more money to come in from hiring a grant specialist, and if the answer is yes, right, if it would be a net gain for the county, then it seems like it makes a lot of sense to do it to me, for sure. So, thanks.
Are there any questions or comments from the budget team at this time?
Well, I guess Victor Hurlbut, Clay County, I guess I know there were a lot of requests from the department for revenues, and based on what I've heard here today, I guess it's something we need to resolve is, it's not currently proposed. And so we've gone around on it, and I guess we're just trying to figure if we can, consider those revenues. And so I guess I just want to clarify, if you've said that there's $7 million and we're going to be doing COP payments, and there are BRO funds available. So, but because no one bid. So just to clarify, I just want to, is that department request still valid? Like, should we expect those revenues in 2020, some of that amount of what was requested?
I would think that in 2021, assuming that we get bids on the bridges this time, I'm making that assumption that we will, that in 2021, we should have 80% reimbursement of those costs. Now, I know that there has been a question that has never been resolved, as far as I know, as to whether the reimbursements should go back into the 2020 or the 220 fund, which is where we've had a few of those reimbursements go to at this point. There's not a great deal of them, or whether those reimbursements should go back into the bond fund, the COP fund, for reuse by the highway department for additional bridge projects. And that would be something that I would also request that we clarify at some point as to what happens to those reimbursements.
Sure, and so I appreciate that, and we'll take that into consideration. I think as far as the aspect of should it go back to the trustee, I think the initial advice I've received from bond counsel and others is that it can stay in Fund 220. So until something else comes from that.
We can use the money for whatever, for roads and bridges, regardless of where it ends up at. So, but it's a matter of clarification and knowing where to expect what funds to show up. So.
Certainly, and I guess that's all I had for now. So I appreciate it.
Benjamin Pedersen, Chief Deputy Auditor. One of the things I want to clarify here is when we talk about a $7 million budget of revenues, the 220 fund for highway is handicapped. There was a dispute with the road and bridge districts on their road and bridge levy. There was a settlement in 2012 that committed the county to pay them at a levy of 0.14. We have a levy that is for us and all of them at 0.0766. We have to gross up whatever receipts we receive for those road and bridge districts up to the 0.14, and it's made up through sales tax or whatever revenues are in 220. And so that results in about $2.6 million of payments to road and bridge districts. And then we have a part of that settlement was to pay them an additional $900,000 of our sales tax. And that will go up to 1.3 million, 1.35 in a couple years. So those are commitments that we have no way to get out of. They're legal settlements right now. And so they have to be funded. So right away, we're looking at close to $3.6 million of the $7 million. So about 48% of the highway budget is committed to be paid out to those road and bridge entities.
I appreciate you bringing that up because that is obviously a huge expenditure to us. And because I work for the citizens in unincorporated Clay County, that inequity in funding from the .0766 to the 14 cents that the cities gets seems extremely unfair. I understand why it is, and I understand it's a court settlement that we can't do anything about, or that is, it is what it is. So, but that is an inequity in funding that we have from the unincorporated county to the cities.
And I think I need to clarify here, but our actual collections of road and bridges, road and bridge levy is $3.6 million. We pay 3.9. So it's roughly $300,000 to $400,000 above our property tax collections go out to those settlements.
Yeah.
Steve Sirks, I just have one follow-up question. On your bridge construction, at what point do you make application for reimbursement from the state?
When we make payment to the contractor or to the engineer, we apply for payment from this, or reimbursement from the state.
So like the engineer would do his job and you would pay him. And then at that point, then you would do a singular request for reimbursement for the engineer fees?
Yes, actually, generally speaking, the engineer or the contractor, either one, bills the highway department once a month for the work that's been completed to that point. When we pay that invoice, we then make application to MoDOT for reimbursement at 80% using the BRO funding.
And that's kind of more like on a monthly basis?
Roughly every month, yes, sir.
So not until the project's completed, but during the progress
Right,
of it?
it's progressive payments throughout the project, yes.
All right, thank you so much.
I'd like to address something that is a little different part of it, an expense that MoDOT, but the Highway Department has, actually two areas, and ones that I see becoming increasingly impactful. Obviously, part of your mission is to maintain and to also clear the road, so when we have a snow event, you're out there clearing county roads and that sort of thing. One of the concerns I have that I think is going to perhaps grow even more problematic as we go along, and that is the question of housing subdivisions in unincorporated Clay County. I believe it was last year, perhaps it was late the previous year, there was the approval of a subdivision just north of Liberty, over by the high school there. And there are several problems. I was opposed to it for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the equipment we have for doing that kind of clearing of the streets of snow and ice is not made for the width of a suburban street and also for the curves. A lot of people, people like to live on cul-de-sacs. A lot of these roads are rather serpentine, rather twisting around, which makes it very, very difficult to plow those streets, much less plow them without doing damage to the roads themselves. Generally speaking, the contractor, the developer who puts in those subdivisions is responsible for those roads to a certain point, and then they become a county responsibility. What worries me is there's a blind spot in some of our planning and zoning that is going to do nothing but increase this problem. I guess what I want to ask you is, how problematic is that? If we could, and the thing is, once we've done this, the subdivision I'm thinking about has some other issues that might make it less of a candidate for incorporation into the nearest municipality, which at the end of the day means we could be stuck with it for a very, very long time. And I'm concerned that we're going to get more and more of those, and those are going to be more expensive, and as we don't have the equipment to plow those in the way they should be plowed, we're going to end up footing the cost for repairs that would not necessarily, we should not necessarily be incurring. So could you kind of address that a little bit, and what the present state of that is, how that impacts our budget, but I do want to have some kind of a look forward on how that works.
We share that concern and have had it for quite some time at the Highway Department. You're right, the large dump trucks that we have are not the best choice for plowing in the subdivisions, although that's all we have right now, so that is what we use. We do have two pickups, large pickups on order that should be delivered in the next couple of months. They were ordered in 2020, just didn't get delivered. And they will have snow plows and sanders attached with them that we plan to use for use in the subdivisions, not just the one that you're referring to there north of Liberty, but throughout the county. And we think that those two pickups will help us tremendously during the winter in terms of getting the subdivisions plowed more efficiently and more cleanly perhaps than what we would with the larger dump trucks. And of course, the plows and sanders are removable, so whenever they are not being used for snow plowing, they'll be used as part of our fleet vehicles and used for other purposes throughout the year. It's not like they're dedicated only for snow plowing. But I appreciate your considering that far ahead, because that is a consideration. We have several subdivisions that are challenging to plow with the big dump trucks.
Well, and like I said, that's something that I see as nothing but increasing, and quite honestly, it's not just this issue. But when you're talking about what amount to suburban-style subdivisions, county government is not the proper tool to govern those areas. We're just not set up for that. Those areas are much better served, and the proper tool is a municipal form of government that understands, that is already equipped to deal with not just the road snow removal, ice removal, and repairs, but the myriad of other things beyond roads, whether it's sewer, water, whatever. There's a lot of issues out there, and this is something we're going to have to deal with, and I think we're going to have to deal with it rather quickly, because the problem is going to just increase. That's something I think we as a commission need to be considering as we go forward and are reviewing the applications for development throughout this county, is how that is going to impact the highway department. Because while we would like to, it would be great to be able to fund every department to the degree that it requires it, particularly with funding being rather low at the moment, or rather close. It seems, adding insult to injury, to put more responsibility on the highway department going forward when it comes to those. So not only is your funding limited, but your mission is not just expanded, but complicated to some degree, because now you've got two different kinds of roads to deal with, basically. And I find that, while not necessarily an issue that it is something we deal with in this budget, because those expenses have to be accounted for, but it's looking forward to future budgets on how we go about that. The other thing, and I realize these are anecdotal, so please don't take it the wrong way, but I've had a number of citizens in unincorporated areas talk about patching their roads and that sort of a thing. There was one situation, at least, well, more than one, where the crews came out and they shoveled the material into the potholes, into the holes. And my understanding was, I wasn't there so I couldn't tell you, but my understanding was it was not like run over with a roller or something like that. And in fact, residents were told, well, the way it packs down is you just have cars drive across it, which is not exactly the best thing when you're driving a car and you've got the material coming up and sticking to it. So that's something I would like to see us addressing. And like I said, this is not necessarily the format, but this is a place to do it. However, when it does come to this, the funding part of it, I'd like to get into a conversation, and maybe after this, subsequent to this, about micro sealing, because I'm concerned that what we're doing with roads, if we're going to do a road and we're going to spend the money to resurface a road, it is, in my estimation, much better to spend a little bit more and have to resurface it or replace it half as frequently. So I'm concerned that we are making sure that our roads don't require more maintenance in the future. And I realize that that's highly anecdotal, and it's a little bit in the weeds, but it's something that I think that we might want to address as we go forward this year and beyond that, so that we can make sure that, once again, I'm thinking in terms of the out years from this as far as budget goes, to make sure that we don't have to address a road surface more often than we should, even if it does mean spending a little bit more money at the outset.
We agree with you, generally speaking. Obviously, there are times that we've had to resurface roads with a less expensive surface, simply because there's only so many dollars to spend on resurfacing every year, and this year is not going to be an exception at all. There are various seal coat type things. You mentioned microsurfacing. There are others as well that we think may be more effective, more cost-effective than what microsurfacing is. But we would welcome an opportunity to be able to do some of that. And like you say, if we can do preventive maintenance in a timely manner, it's less expensive than complete replacement.
And as we're going through this budget process, that discussion might be helpful in that it might be easier for us to see our way to adjust funding if we see it as a real investment in not having to redo it. So I mean, I realize it's a balancing act of spending more now and picking up the savings down the road, but it's a conversation I think worth having.
I was going to say, our original budget proposal back in mid-year 2020, when it was first presented, included money specifically for seal coating some of the roads. Whenever the adjustments were made and everything was put all in together into one fund, we lost the line item requests on any of those things, but certainly we'd be open to looking at how we can best spend the available funds to get, as you said, the biggest bang for the buck. So absolutely, we'd be glad to address those.
I'm sorry, I kind of jumped in there and did an awful lot of talking. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have anything else?
I do not.
Commissioner Thompson, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I do not, thank you.
Okay. Budget team is good?
Commissioner?
Yes, I just have one question, Commissioner, and for Highway Director. I'm wondering about, pull up the screen here. Could you speak to the request for that fund? And this is for Fund 300, the general use tax. And is that something that could be of use, or could you speak to the requests for that budget?
As we were preparing our budget request for 2021, I was asked to provide $500,000 worth of capital equipment that could be put in that line item, and I did so. That is equipment that we do need. The two rollers, we have those rollers now, but one of them is about 20 years old. The other one is not quite so old, but they are both on their last leg of useful life. The fuel truck that we're requesting, we use it to fuel equipment that's in the field, as well as to fuel generators and other items for facilities of the Sheriff's Department. And again, that vehicle is reaching the end of its useful life. So, and the tractor and arm mower, that one is also something that we will use on a regular basis, continuously throughout the county. We have a lot of right-of-ways that need to have brush cleared, trees cut, and just generally maintained, and the tractor with the additional arm mower would be very helpful to us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Steve Sirk's budget. Just a follow-up question to that. Were those items that were originally in your original budget request?
Yes, that was in our original budget request in 2021. That was the request that was submitted mid-year 2020.
Were you told to put those things in there originally, or did you, on your own volition, do that?
That line had been used in the 2020 budget at $500,000, so we put the same amount in that budget line for 2021.
So in 2020, $500,000 is allocated for things of that nature, and you were told to reuse that again?
I was asked to use it again.
Okay. Well, and I also, looking at the 301-820 in use tax, it looks like the department request was showing $1.7 million for asphalting county roads, and that's 301-820-340. And the amended request came in at 1.2 million, and then the final proposal was 2.9 million. Are those funds sufficient to do what you need to do?
The 2.9 million that is currently shown there includes all those items that I mentioned earlier that were thrown into a single account. It includes equipment repair parts, equipment leases, fuel, and other items that we were told to remove from the 220 fund and put into the 301 fund. When we requested specific items to be moved. We requested them by line, and instead we got this 2.9 million, which is why I said up front that it would be helpful to have some clarification as to exactly what's included in this number, because right now it includes, I know among other things that's critical, is equipment leases that we pay for, that we already have, that are outstanding, that we are required to pay, and it's very unclear that something like that's included in road construction materials or in asphalt. It's very non-transparent.
Well, and I know you've mentioned fuel a couple of times, and it looks like in the, your regular budget line item, you were budgeted $100,000 for fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you asked for more than that. And you keep mentioning the sheriff's office. I guess they're probably one of the biggest users
They are.
of the fuel.
Other than the highway department, they use more fuel than any other department, obviously.
But you do not totally pay for the sheriff's fuel, is that correct?
The sheriff does reimburse us for the fuel that they use, but we still have to have the money available throughout, I mean, they reimburse us for the fuel that they use, but it doesn't necessarily, but we have to have enough money throughout the year to pay for the entire, for the fuel that we need to order from time to time.
So where does that reimbursement money go?
It goes back into the, it is allocated back into the 220 fund, or into the, what is it, 701, 233? 332, 701, the 220, 701, 332.
And what is that?
That's the fuel.
So the sheriff's office, who's your biggest user, reimburses you on a monthly basis, tell me if I'm
Yes,
incorrect,
that's correct.
for the fuel. So, and they have money in their budget to pay for that. So if you have $100,000 in your budget, it's really not paying for the sheriff's fuel because they're reimbursing you for their use. Is that correct?
I see your point. Yes, that is correct, but we still have to have the money to pay for the fuel as it's delivered before the sheriff's department reimburses us.
Does that get to be a problem with the reimbursement being there in time to pay the invoice?
Oh, the reimbursement never comes before the invoice. The invoice comes within 48 hours of the time we receive the fuel, and we bill the sheriff's department once a month.
So do you ever run out of money before you're able to
By
pay
the
that
end of the
invoice?
year, we're tight on cash in that account, a lot of years. Yes, sir.
I think a lot of departments are in the same boat, so, yeah.
I understand that.
At the end of
So-
the year, they're like trying to press two dimes together. Okay. That's all the questions I had. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
One last question you've referred to, they had instructed you, are you referring to the Budget Committee under the last administration?
Yes.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, I see none, then thank you very much for being here. Do you have any, if you have any closing remarks? We still have, I think, 15 minutes of your time. If you'd like to use that to make any closing remarks, we'd certainly be happy to hear them.
I don't think I have 15 more minutes worth of anything to say. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. With that, we have, our next is the Assessor's Office at 3:30. We have 15 minutes. Since we're at the end of the day and we seem to be a little bit ahead of schedule, I think what I'd like to do is for us to stand at ease for maybe 10, 15 minutes and do a little stretching, and then we will resume at 3:30, hearing from the county auditor, and after that, the MU extension on outside expenses. With that, we will stand at ease. Yes.
Yes, no, I gave him a call and I told him that we were looking into it. Put his mind at ease to talk about it, so he's gonna give us some information, I'm just gonna talk to him, so. Okay, that's fine, yeah, I just wanted to just reach out to him too, but I wanna get all the information.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, we did the same thing. It's like, get all the information, then call the person back and say, we're looking at it, and then call again later and say, whatever the final number is.
Yeah, I just wanted him to feel like he was just abandoned and like, it's not, it's relaxed, I know I just want to take a call.
Anytime.
Yeah, thank you for that, I appreciate it.
Victor? I want to ask you about something. Okay. We will all get settled in now. We are back from standing at ease. Where we will take up our agenda is, we're still doing budget hearings, of course, and we will be hearing from the assessor's office under the 285 and other headings on that, other budget headings. Just to bring us back in, I'm also going to mention that the way we work this is we would like everyone to, just to introduce yourself as we go along, give us an idea of what the office does for the benefit of those watching either on the live streaming and, of course, the recordings that we're doing. And then if you could explain, some of your comments and concerns about budget, then we will go sort of a round robin with questions. So that's kind of the way we'll be proceeding. So please go right ahead. Oh, and yes, of course, the green.
I'm Kathy Reinhardt, the Clay County Assessor, and I brought with me Don Holterman, the Assessment Office Manager, and Tracy Baldwin, the Assessor-elect. He'll be taking office September 1st of 2021, and I thought he needed to be in on the budget process. We had a meeting, gosh, when was that, October? Yep. And went through everything. And I think the only thing that might have changed on here is, I just found out that we're probably going to have to send out 80,000 value change notices this year because the market is very good, to the dismay of most people that live in Clay County. They don't want their values to go up, but anyway.
Could you speak a little bit more into the microphone, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we probably don't have enough money in postage is what I'm trying to get to, bottom line. And postage is 285, 720, 290. Oh, okay, 291. We have 90,000 in postage, so we're going to be sending out 80,000 value change notices in real estate, and then there'll be another 120,000, well, maybe not, we have to do that. Anyway, 120,000 letters for personal property to tell people to go online and assess themselves. So I think that needs to be bumped 45? Yeah. At least 45, maybe 50,000 for postage next year. Then in 2022, when Tracy starts his cycle, it'll be in the middle of a tax season, and it'll be less.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
Why don't you give us a little, because like I say, the people listening, assessor is a pretty self-descriptive kind of a job.
What-
But just kind of give
Okay.
people who are listening kind of an idea of the responsibilities your office has.
What we do is we place value on every vehicle, truck, car, sea-doo, boat, trailer. We don't do bees anymore, however, we still do cows, chickens, and horses. We place value on all of the residential property. We place value on all the commercial property. We even place value on exempt properties, so somebody could call up and say, I have a church, what do you have it on for? I want to sell it, or I'd like to insure it, and my insurance company says it's this, and we have it on for less or more. That's what we do. We gather information, thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of information, and when we're all done, we send that over to the county collector, and the county collector generates the bill, applies the levy, and sends out the bills. The other thing we have in the assessment department is the GIS/mapping department. It goes hand in hand. GIS is a geographic information system that's automatic, it's automated, and it takes flat maps that people give us descriptions for, and we put it into the system and try to make it go on around Earth and not have gaps. And GIS is very complex, and it's extremely expensive. The minute they show up, you just flip open your checkbook and start writing, because you start at 2,000 and go up from there. It's very expensive.
And you have locations, although obviously right now we are all under a COVID-19 protocols, but you have offices both here in the administration building and at the annex.
Yes,
over
at
on
the annex, we have the business personal property department and personal property. In Liberty, we have the residential real estate, we have the commercial real estate, and then over at the Schrader building, we have the GIS department. And then downstairs, in this building. I have my attorney and a paralegal that works for the office.
Is the only thing that you see on the budget that you have concerns about the postage because of this rather unusual circumstance?
Oh, we have a position for a programmer on there that's new this year. And this person has been with the county for several years, and hopefully I can still keep him. I don't know if I'll be able to or not. He's the person that gets the data ready to send to the collector so she can use what we have, because she has to convert it into her system. We're not on the same system. We tried that, and it was a total disaster. He also has been writing a software program for the assessment department for our scanning and our online assessment, and being able to send out emails to people, capturing those emails so that we can send out notices that says, hey, we didn't hear from you. Are you still in the county? Let's try to save postage. So somebody needs to have a programmer in this county, and if it's not going to be you, then please allow it to be me.
And that would account for the
$60,000.
exactly under your 100 item.
Yes.
And just for those listening, the 100s or 101 is salary elected official, 102 salaries for full-time, and then it goes down from there with the different
Correct.
components, FICA and the like. So
Correct.
that's the area we're talking about in the budget.
Yes. Now, the other thing we need to bring to your attention is we have been in negotiations with Harris Company, which is the company that has our CAMA software that we purchased that, oh my gosh, it was supposed to be our real estate system, our personal property system, and the collection system. And anyway, it ended up just being the real estate system. So we have negotiated with Harris to give us back the equivalent of about, what did I say, 800,000? But they're not going to give us money per se, but they're going to give us,
Credit?
we're in the process. They came in and they trained us, retrained us in December. There's still some bugs in the system that need to be worked out. There's all kinds of things. Now, we have a signed contract from the collector that said she will pay for our maintenance for Harris out of the 305 fund. We're going to have to get you a copy of I've got it here that says she'll pay it and how much it is, and it's about $90,000 a year. I haven't paid them anything for maintenance.
Now, what was the fund that you were talking about?
It's the 305 fund. It's the fund that she uses from the cities that pay her, and the county gets a portion of that, and then,
Right.
and whatever doesn't get spent goes to you.
And
Well-
that's just for and again, for people listening, the collector was here earlier today, and she did outline that fund a little bit, but this is one of the uses
Yes.
that fund would be put to.
It's for technology, and this is definitely technology. And I
Right.
have an agreement from her. It's here, but I'll get you the one that specifically speaks about the maintenance. And we have not paid maintenance to Harris for 18, 19, or 20. So, because it's like, no, you've got some bugs here, they need to be worked out. I'm not paying you a dime until, I'm not paying you until you make this right. So we are getting closer to the bugs being worked out. We're getting closer to getting the enhancements and the things that we've asked for that were promised, it goes on and on and on. But I wanted you to be aware that that does need to come out of that fund, because I don't have an extra $90,000 lying around or coming in from the State Tax Commission. As a matter of fact, the State Tax Commission promised us $270,000, $283, and I think we got $242. Because originally they were going to give us $3 a parcel for all the parcels, and then they only gave us $3 a parcel for the first 20,000, and then the other 90,000 or 80, 75,000, we got $2.45 or something like that. Yeah,
I think what-
242.
I think what might be helpful when you're talking about the agreement on the funding, if we could get it to the clerk, and if the clerk wouldn't mind distributing it to commission, administrator, and budget team, that would probably That would probably get everybody covered.
Yes, we'll get it.
Yeah.
Right now. We're looking for, we've got part of it, we don't have all of it, so we'll find it and get it to you.
That
And
would be great, thank you.
So that's everything I have, except I do, since I've got all three of you here, I'd like to ask a question, or I'd like to tell you what's coming down the pike. We have this form, I'm sure you've seen it before. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Jerry. I know you haven't, John, and I know you have. And it's for county errors when the assessment department makes a mistake and doesn't add a car, or we add a car and it had been crossed off, and they pay the bill and, or they pay it late, or whatever. It's to waive penalty and interest because it's for a county error.
I'm familiar with that particular,
Well,
that
that
particular
was
state law.
different. You know,
Oh,
they're
the
saying.
one that I worked on when I was at the state?
Yes, this is the one you worked on, but it's
thought
not
so.
for values.
It's from
like-
mistakes of the county.
Yeah, it's from the
Yeah,
stakes of
errors.
the county.
Yeah,
It's-
errors on our part, yeah.
Yeah.
When I was in the legislature, one of the things that came up, and it was actually put forward by folks within county government, that is, there we go.
Yeah, you're looking at her.
Yeah, that's why I was looking at you.
Yes.
The state of, state law was that money could not be reimbursed even if the county said, or whatever political
Yeah, we
subdivision
made a
said it was
mistake.
an error on our part, we still can't refund that to you. Kathy brought it to me because she had to come up with a number of people, and it struck her as unfair, so there was it's always a Senate bill.
Okay, well,
We got on there, so that is
you're
where
going
that
to
came
start
from.
seeing more of these.
Okay.
And, I mean, for a while, there was an agreement if I said, hey, there's an error, it would be just automatically taken off, but
Right.
there's a little pushback, and I get that, I understand, I'm not the collector, I'm not the one that has to say, no, I can't give you your money back. So you're going to be seeing more of these. So my question to you all is, do you want them run through the clerk to get on the agenda? Because they all went through the agenda before, and we would stand up and say, yeah, the assessor didn't data enter an entire page that this person sent in, so we don't have all their business equipment on there. Or, yes, we did this December the 3rd, and for whatever reason, the paperwork didn't get to the collector, so a bill wasn't generated, and somebody's been trying to pay a bill for 4 months, and blah, 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 blah. I just wanted you to be
Sure.
aware that these are coming. I just need to know where who I give them to, if I
Yeah.
get them in my office, and then Lydia will need to know who to give them to if she gets one in her office.
I think, and again, this is going to be a decision made by the commission. We should address this in another meeting, but my initial feeling is, and obviously either commissioner wants to weigh in addition would be great, is my thought is to get with the administrator, see what
Okay.
process he wants
All right.
to fill. My preference would be on something like this, that we in the future have something akin to a consent agenda, so that we wouldn't be necessarily taking them all up
Bingo. I
individually.
agree.
So
I
that
agree.
we could review those, and if we
Well-
agree they're all valid, we just vote for it. Any commissioner would be able to take anything off of the consent agenda that they thought was
Now,
an issue.
what you will see is you will see some people that fill these out and send them in, and it comes to me or it comes to Lydia, and it's like, no, this is not a county error. I didn't make a mistake, Lydia didn't make a mistake, my staff didn't make a mistake, her staff didn't make a mistake. This is just somebody that's angry. Then you guys get to decide that, no, they're not entitled. But that was,
Yippee-yi-yo.
the only way this was supposed to work is if the assessor or the collector said, hey, there's a boo-boo here. You, the three of you, do not have the legal right, from what I understand, to just arbitrarily sign these and go, hey, you have to do this.
Well, I noticed that
Because my best friend
Yeah.
didn't turn their list in.
The designee administrator who will be taking office, in
Who
a
is
rather
the-
short period, is
where is
Mr.
he?
Tom Salisbury over there. Tom, did you hear enough of this conversation to? I think the
Oh, you
best.
just walked in?
I
Well,
think
nice
that.
to meet you.
I think the best way forward.
There you go. Hey, works for me. There you
Well,
go.
come on up and have a seat at the table. But I think the thing to do might be for you to get your heads together, and
Okay.
then Tom can make a proposal, possibly along the lines I just mentioned, and
Mr.
present that to
Salisbury,
the
do you have an
commissioners.
email address at Clay County? I can send you this.
have one for the county yet, but I will next week. I'll come see you in person.
Okay, no problem.
Did you, Commissioner,
All sounds very reasonable to me. Yeah.
did you have anything, Commissioner Thompson?
Sorry. Yes, I know, I think that sounds fine. I think just bring it for the commission probably, and we'll consult
Okay.
with Tom Salisbury.
I just
and-
didn't want you guys to go, why did these regenerate? Because they're coming back.
Am I right in assuming that that they would come into you guys and then and that you would fill the form out saying, yes, we agree, we did make an error, and then it would come to us? Is
Well,
that
where
kind
it
of
used to go, it
Uh-huh.
used to go to the county first,
Right.
and then they distributed it to Lydia and I. And then we would drag it back up and give it to whoever was sitting at the front desk up there.
Sure.
And then it got on the agenda, and however you decided to work it from there.
Let's-
There are not very many of them, fortunately, thank God, in Greyhound, but there are a few. And sometimes, people move, and they don't think, oh, I owe somebody, and then they realize, and, it's 6 months down the road, and I understand why Lydia might not want to waive penalty interest. It's like, why did you only wake up 6 months ago? Well, I didn't need to tag my car. But it's still a county error, period. So, anyway, I wanted you to be aware, and we will work through something, get something worked up for
Good.
you all.
I
Is
think
there
that-
anything you need from me?
Well, I was going to say, that was kind of a lot of really, your department is pretty straightforward. You run a pretty tight ship, so I don't have too much. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have any questions or
I
thoughts?
appreciate y'all coming and presenting today. Nothing occurs to me right now. Appreciate y'all holding the line on the budget. Sounds like other than postage, which is outside of your control, that,
Well, I didn't realize the market was going to go that nuts, but it's crazy.
well, and I know, it's a role that not every citizen's always pleased to have their rates go up, but I think we're very lucky here in Clay County, especially folks who have some familiarity with other counties in this state that have struggled to keep accurate assessments over the years and have gotten dramatically off over the decades. I know we're pretty lucky that that's not the case here, and
No, that's not the case here. If it
grateful
needs to
for
go
y'all's-
up, I take it up. If it needs to go down, I take it down.
Yep.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yeah, I do have a question. I know that I've heard rumors when I was clerk, that there's going to be some changes to this year when it comes to the reassessment with the BOE.
What?
Is there going to be some BOE?
What do you mean?
I heard the time frame. Is it
Oh,
gonna be-
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so there's going to be some things that are going to go on there. I didn't know if there's anything that we need to prepare for as the commission.
I don't know. It's mostly going to be the clerk that's going to get stuck with it.
Well, we know.
Yes, so yeah, no, since we have changed our form of government and they also changed the law, oh my gosh, we used to have, BOE started the third Monday in June, and now I think you can file an appeal clear up till the second Monday in July, and then BOE has to be, right after that.
But none of that's going to impact your budget. You guys feel
No, it
okay
doesn't
with
affect
that?
my budget, it
Okay.
just, I can also tell you that $4 million worth of appeals have been made in, they're appealing they're protesting their taxes. Maybe you can help with this. You know anybody on the Port Authority?
Yes.
They're taxable. Their levy has to be paid. They are not exempt. They are hell-bent for leather that they are exempt, and they are not.
We need to talk offline on that because I think that is something we need to be looking at.
Well,
It
they-
wasn't brought right up to, I mean, it's not on front of mind right now, but it's something I think we should talk about and see if there's something that needs to be done.
Well, even churches pay that special levy tax.
Okay.
Because there's a levy, that's dirt that you
Yeah.
pay to keep that thing maintained. And everybody in North Kansas City pays that, even the port authorities. But they're of the opinion that they're exempt, and I'm like, no, Kansas City's not exempt, North Kansas City's not exempt, churches are not exempt, and you're not above any of them, so you're paying. So they've paid under protest, and we're trying to, if you know anybody over there, tell them to
do.
give us a call, and we'll try to tell them how the cow
Maybe
ate
we
the
can
cabbage.
talk a little bit this week.
Yeah.
We did talk about that in October.
You guys going to put that in yours?
That was my next question.
Okay,
To see
yes.
how, because I know that wasn't something that, we've discussed over the years with the BOE board members and how you guys wanted to have that removed from your line item and put it under the commission.
Right.
So I
Or
didn't know
put
if
it
that's,
underneath
because I
the
noticed it's
clerk.
still here.
You can, yeah, that would be nice.
Or I guess it could possibly go under the clerk. But yeah, I didn't know if you guys had had any
If the state would
conversations
quit
or-
cutting what they're sending to me, I'd be happy to pay for the Board of Equalization, but I've never had a comfort level with me paying for the board members and then me standing before the board members saying, hey, wait a minute, change this value, make it what I say it is. I mean, it could sound funny.
Well, let me go ahead and expand on that a little bit, because you did mention what BOE stood for. Again, we have a tendency sometimes to talk in acronyms.
The Board of Equalization
Yes.
are the three men that the commission appoint for 3-year terms. They are paid to come in and listen to the citizens of Clay County with their concerns about the value that I've placed on their property. And for years, the assessment department was the only department that had any extra money. So the assessment department gave, I don't know, I'm making up a number here, $25,000 to the clerk, because the BOE clerk is underneath the clerk of the county. And I have said in the last few years that, and I've said a long time, that I didn't think the assessment department should be paying out of my funds the 3 people that sit on the Board of Equalization. It doesn't seem to be far enough, doesn't seem to be an arm's length transition.
No, I agree with you, and what you're saying in essence is, it's like going before a judge, and you're the one paying the judge.
Yes.
And I think that's a good observation, and what I think is great that you're making, especially since you are a participant, is saying, I need to be at arm's length. So I think that's an example of good government, and yet it needs to be separated so that people
I've always
have more
thought that.
confidence in a fair shake.
That's why I've never been involved with the Board of Equalization. I don't even come to those things, because it's like, I don't want anybody to go, oh, Kathy Reinhardt, blah, blah. It's like, I don't even know them. They're not my friends. I don't know them from Boo. They walked in here, I would barely be able to recognize them, because I've been paying for them all these years. I think last year was 2 years I haven't paid. But I think you guys need to pick the tab. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Victor, you're going to have to find more money somewhere.
But no, and you're right. The thing is, those are 3, men or women, depending on how the appointments go, that are appointed by the commission to, in fact, review citizen appeals of their assessments.
Well, and the other piece of puzzle is that once they are appointed, you cannot unappoint them. They either have to drop dead, move out of the county, or resign.
Yes.
You can't just arbitrarily go, oh, well.
That came up a couple of years ago.
I know.
Yeah.
We ended up with 4 instead of 3. So I'm just saying that's there's a reason for that. They have a lot of power. A lot of power.
I do have, although I have a limited confidence in government some days, I had confidence that the government could differentiate between the number 3 and the number 4.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Apparently, in that case, that was not necessarily.
We got it taken care of.
It got taken care of.
Yes,
It was
did.
handled.
You only had to pitch one fit. It happened.
With that, I think both commissioners, were you finished? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
Thank you, Commissioners. No, I just want to make sure that if that was needed to be addressed, and I do think that moving forward, if we need to have a discussion about it, I think the clerk's office could be a good resource to utilize, as they are more of the liaison between the citizens, the board.
It needs to go to the clerk. That whole thing needs to
And
go.
the assessment department,
Here you go,
there's
ma'am.
no authority within there. We just make sure they sign paperwork, we shuffle the papers, it's a big process, but there's, the clerk's office, we used to do this, but the clerk's office doesn't make those decisions,
No.
and they are a separate entity that just kind of helps everybody. So
Well,
it would make
we've even
sense.
found something with our new software that's going to automate it a whole lot better. Yeah, we found that out when we got more training. It's like, oh, we didn't know that section actually worked, and we're going to make it work this year. So it'll mainstream it a lot. It'll make it better. That's if we don't kill ourselves
That's all I
before.
have.
But
Does the budget team have any questions or comments?
Steve Sirk's budget team, I just have a couple follow-up questions just for clarification, and I think that maybe Auditor Hurlbert maybe has a couple comments also. So,
Okay.
if I could real quick, you said you were sending out, what was the number of reassessment letters you'd be sending out?
around 80,000.
And your current budget for postage,
They're change of value notices, and then every year we send out personal property lists. So this year being an even year, we didn't send out as many value change notices, because you only send out a value change notice if it's a brand-new house or somebody's added something to a commercial building. They pulled a permit that would change the value.
well, your department postage request and proposed budget is $90,000.
No, look
90.
down a line.
Say again?
Look down a line. 291.
That's the one that I'm looking at,
No. I don't think so.
285, 720.
There's one that says 9,000 and there's one that says 90.
Yes,
They're both postage.
okay. And which one are you suggesting needs to be increased?
291. It doesn't matter, it's all postage.
Okay. And what amount are you requesting?
We're asking between 45 and 50.
Say that again, please.
Between 45 and 50,000.
So upwards of $50,000 added on to the postage.
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because I didn't really hear that the
I'm
first
sorry.
time around, so my
I don't
my
know, I
fault.
put on a mask and I can't hear, so you tell me what that is.
It affects me the same way too.
It does, it's like, I don't understand this.
Regarding your programmer position,
Yes.
is that a new position you're requesting?
Yes,
And did you have anything salary-wise or that you
yes,
proposed?
it's in there, it's 60,000.
Where is that at?
Oh, I don't know. You didn't give us anything. When we had the meeting back in whatever, we walked out of there with the same paper we walked in with, nothing. It should be in there, Jerry's got it here.
I think it's in that breakdown.
Did anyone
I'm
else see
hoping
that?
it is anyway.
See that in the budget? I know in the past, they have told office holders to come to the commission when they had their budget meetings
Uh-huh.
and propose that, but I'm not seeing that. Are you seeing it anywhere in the budget?
I don't know where to look.
I guess the question, Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor, I guess the question we're looking for is, do you feel that we should add that budget request for that position to your payroll budget line?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So, and you said it would be a,
$60,000 position.
okay. So that's something we can consider and
I don't see it on here either, so.
Could I just do a follow-up? Because I just want to clarify something I think that you'd mentioned, thank you, previously, and that was that the function needed for that position needed to be done either within your office, or if we as the administration could perform that function, then that would render that, so you're good either way.
I don't care who does it, as long as it gets done.
Right, so that might be something that we would be considering as we go forward to look at what our capabilities we offer, particularly this office holder, as far as that goes, to see if, what would be the more cost-effective way to go.
And just another follow-up question.
Okay.
The budget book shows that your projected expenditures for 2020 was about $1.7 million in salaries, not including the office holder salary. And then the proposed budget is just a little bit over $2 million. Do you think that would fit within that existing proposed budget?
Just go ahead and hold on to that, that way you've got a little more record.
Pardon?
I don't see anybody in here. There's a vacant one, commercial real estate.
Yeah, but this is our old money.
That's they didn't show it. No, in answer to your question, I don't think so. You might want to give us a call, so I know what you're looking at, because I don't know, this doesn't mean diddly to me.
Of course, this was printed back in November of 2020,
Well, we
and I don't
weren't-
know how up-to-date that information in there
Steve, we
is.
weren't given, we walked in, we told them what we wanted, they wrote it all down, and we walked out, and that was it, and this is the first I'm seeing that. I mean, we're standing here blind,
Okay.
but, so.
Okay, I just wanted some clarification
No.
on that. I didn't know if it was already
Just add
showing.
60,000 on there, and we'll find a programmer, and we'll go from there. As
Well, then
long as you don't have to pay for it, right?
Yeah, well, then
Yeah.
you have to add in FICA and loggers
Yep,
and
I
surf,
know,
and
I
so it's
understand.
probably going to be about
I get it.
80,000 plus.
It's-
Okay,
It will be. It'll be 60 plus 30% at least.
yeah, okay.
I got it.
I think that's all the questions I had.
Okay, oh, thank you.
Victor, did you have anything?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, thank you, Budget Consultant Cirques. It's Clay County Auditor Victor Hurlbert. The only thing I think Commissioner Thompson brought that up, just that, we wanted clarification as the budget team is, was that request we've heard before for the assessor's office to move BOE out of Fund 285, and I think you've answered that, so thank you for answering that.
So it'd be all of Department 723.
Yes.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments that anybody would like to make as far as this particular part of the budget goes? I'd just like to make one last observation, and that is we appreciate the service, Kathy, that you've rendered to the county as assessor. And I feel very good about the fact that Tracy will be following you and will be able to virtually seamlessly keep the high level of service that the assessor's department has been giving to the citizens of this county. So I'm very hopeful, I'm very anxious, very happy that we're looking at such a smooth transition. It doesn't always happen this way, but I'm very happy that Tracy is here to kind of go through the budget process at this point, so that next year it is again, seamless, and you feel very comfortable coming before us. With that?
Maybe. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
No, we got more.
Thank you. We have one more to hear from. Yeah, it was an addition. Under outside agencies, I've forgotten the number.
I don't remember, and they weren't in my
Request is
packet.
something like 78. We could ask Steve real
Okay,
quick.
I just hate to be rude, and I just want to, it wasn't in my budget book, so, okay. Sorry, Jerry.
John, this is listed, the budget line on this is under outside agencies, 100, 630. So just so that if you want to follow along your budget.
Yeah, no, I will, but what's our last group?
This is it. This is our last one.
No,
Oh, the
no,
MU extension. MU
extension.
Okay. If you folks want to come on up, GK. Our last group today is from the MU Extension Program, which we've had a long relationship with as a county. Just to give you guys kind of an up to speed, the red lights on your microphones are off. Push the button, it goes green. We are live streaming, so smile through the masks. The other thing is, with the way we've been working this is, please introduce yourselves, give us a little information about what MU Extension does in Clay County, and then talk a little bit about, I think you're asking for the same request as last year, if I remember correctly. Is that?
We asked for just a little bit more. I think
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
$3,000 more than we got
Very
last
good.
year, so.
Okay, so we'll ask you to, I'm sorry, too many numbers. But we will go ahead and get started, so if you folks wouldn't mind, GK, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my
Go.
name's GK Callahan, and I'm the County Engagement Specialist and the Community Arts Specialist for the University of Missouri Extension Clay County. It's quite a title, huh? I help run and operate the Clay County office, and I brought along today my colleague.
Hi, I'm Sarah Moorfield, and I am the 4-H Youth Development Specialist that oversees our youth programs for ages 5 to 18 for all of Clay County.
And so specifically what we do is we bring Mizzou to you. I mean, our goal is to bring the university to the citizens of Clay County. I think most people in this room should know that we're part of a land grant mission that's been established since the 1700s. And so we want to bring the education and the value that the University of Missouri has around the state to its citizens. I brought packets just for the commissioners. I'm sorry I didn't know there was going to be an audience for everyone else. But just to give an idea, though I know you're quite familiar with this, Jerry and
Sure.
Megan, of what the university does. It's almost overwhelming. In Clay County alone, we offer nutrition, community development, business development, agriculture, horticulture, master gardeners, and community arts, just in Clay County. I would like to say our specialty in Clay County, which is why I brought my colleague, is our youth programs. When Sarah joined, we were only serving about 130 youth. Before coronavirus, we were up to 735 youth.
1,001.
1,001, look at that. See, that's why I brought her with us. So that's one of the main things that we're really proud of ourselves in Clay County, is we really try to bring the education at a really young level and with our 4-H programs. And you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so obviously.
Push your button.
Not on. There we go. So we have had huge growth, and that has been in partnership with our schools. So we still have our community program. If you're familiar with 4-H, that's the traditional model, and they have continued to grow as well, a little slower, but they're growing. But we have added a couple community clubs, but the primary reason for growth is we have partnered in both North Kansas City School District and Kearney with the Kearney Firehouse Community Center to work with after-school programs. So we've been able to really just bust wide open our numbers and reach families that had never heard of us, families that may not be able to access the traditional model where a parent has to show up with them and has to be able to sit there through that whole time. So we've also increased our camp offerings. We do mini day camps throughout the year. We have a couple day camps in the summer as well as our overnight camp. And we've increased our leadership opportunities for our teens, trying to show them the benefits of staying in the program, which then, of course, ties back to the university, and we have lots of scholarship opportunities regardless of whether or not they go to Mizzou or elsewhere. So those are the main areas that we've really seen our growth, and in doing so, we've been able to partner with various places in the community, businesses. We got into Smithville through the mayor. He found us, and that's what brought us into Smithville in a whole bunch of different ways. So we've really found lots of new relationships throughout the county with our youth programming that we then are able to tie to what we do in the rest of the office and bring in other programs that way. So it's a really nice introduction because we work with both youth and adults and businesses throughout the community to help us grow as an office.
Yeah, and we specifically work with a lot of different municipalities. I myself sit on the Gladstone Arts Council. We work, like she said, with the mayor of Smithville, with the people of Clay Como, Kearney, Liberty. We offer, I mean, it's almost an overwhelming range of services, and so that's why I'm hesitant to delve deep into what I want to, explain. But
we try to be present in all corners of Clay County. So if I don't have a club in every corner, I try to host activities in every corner, something to make sure that all of the county is truly benefiting from our services. And I think that goes office-wide.
yeah, another thing that we started doing the last few years is taking a regional approach. So because Extension's in all 114 counties plus the city of St. Louis, we have an Urban West Region Extension and a regional council. And so we're partnering with Clay, Platte, and Jackson County to make sure that we're offering those services all around Kansas City and not just limiting them within our county scope.
Recently, within the last year, on the 4-H youth side, we're also now communicating with Kansas City on the Kansas side to have a full, true Kansas City partnership, mostly at the teen level, for them to be able to cross state line, because most of us who live here consider Kansas City, and don't pay attention to where all the borders are. So that's in development. COVID did pause some of that, but we are still in communication and hopeful to get something going.
Yeah, and just to clarify, we use your funds not only for programming, but to help support us with support staff. So it helps support the salary of 2 of our support secretaries, and then it matches the salary that the university puts in on some youth program associates and some nutrition program associates.
And our support staff are 25 to 38 years in. They are very loyal to MU Extension and have really thoroughly enjoyed being Clay County employees. If you've ever been to our office, I'm sure you have met either Edith or Sandy. We are very fortunate to have all their wisdom at our front desk.
Does that sound about?
Yes.
Thank you. One of the things, and by the way, what we'll do now is we'll go to the kind of question and answer thing. We have, as a county, a member, and I happen to be that member, who serves on the board. Yes. We meet once a month, and I can tell you from my experience that it's a very full agenda. GK is right. Trying to sit here and name all of the programs would be a Herculean feat. One of the ones that, for better or worse, in my age group that I identify with is the Grand Families Program. So the thing is, we're talking about this as an outside agency, so this is a little bit different animal than what we've been talking about in the other agencies of the government. One of the base requirements for outside agencies is that its mission is to serve the entire county, not just a specific area. And as you've heard, MU Extension clearly checks that box as far as serving a wide variety of communities throughout our county. Also, as you may or may not be aware, they have offices at the existing annex at the moment. So they are also someone that we partner with in that manner as well. I had no idea when I started just how broad their mission was. And I've also been there during their budget talks, obviously as a board member, and I can tell you they've done a great job on economizing. I realize this group, particularly our budget team, is no stranger to sharpening the pencil as much as possible. They are asking for a pretty modest increase. There were thoughts that they might have more challenges than they presently face, but because of the fact that they've budgeted responsibly and done a good job on making the dollars stretch, their request for an increase is very slight indeed. But I want to, the other thing is that, and I'll just bring this up because it's kind of something that we'll be doing later, and that is, I've been on, I think, for 2 terms on the board. I think it's pretty much time for me to go ahead and let somebody else have, and really it's fun, but I would be looking for one of the other 2 commissioners as we get into likely February, where we'll start doing, and maybe at the end of this month, start doing assignments to different boards and commissions that we serve on and that we as a commission have a seat on. So I would certainly heartily endorse and encourage either commissioner who has an interest in the ability to attend these meetings to put their, to volunteer to be in this position, because it is a very good one. Their meetings are in the evenings. So
Usually at the end of the Tuesdays.
Yes.
Once a month.
Once a month in the evening. So, like I said, I think this is an organization that's done a great job and contributed to the growth of our county. So there's a lot of great things to be said about them, and I can't quite get them all out. So I'll just let this go open to the group.
Jerry, do you mind if I clarify?
Please,
to
go
the
right
budget
ahead.
Team? Besides just the money that the commission gives us, we also try to make that up with fees, grants, and contracts throughout the year. So we do look for other sources of revenue. We don't just rely on the county, though we very much appreciate your support to help our operations. As an urban region, we brought in over $700,000 that year, this last year, during coronavirus to support the extension mission around the Kansas City region. So I just wanted to make that clear as well to the budget committee.
No, I really appreciate that. That's an important thing. And could you also give us an idea, because I don't off the top of my head know how many years that you have been partnering with the county?
We've been in your office for over 38 years, in a county office, as far as I know. I've only worked with Extension for 5, so my memory doesn't go any further than that. I'm sorry.
And I'm going on 4,
It's been a long time we've been partnering with the county. So we've had a place in a county location for the last 38 years.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have any thoughts or questions?
No, just thanks for coming and the presentation and the information. I've heard only good things about MU Extension over the years, and look forward to getting you all some money. So thanks. Good to meet you.
You too.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Can you guys hear me? So I will say, there's not enough kind things I can say about the University of Missouri Extension programs. I have been a huge fan. I do come and I used to swear in all the members and frequent your meetings. So my heart is definitely with you guys and your mission and things you guys do within the community. And I have actually volunteered, for the past 6 years with the 4-H kids and judging their projects, and it's pretty close to my heart. And I never got to do that as a kid, but I love that we were able to do that for our children in Clay County, and that you guys are branching that out even further. You guys do so much great work. So I'm a huge fan. I think you all know that. So I won't babble on too long, but I think you guys do a great job, and thank you so much for coming in and seeing us today.
Of course.
Great, thanks.
Is there any comment or question from the budget team?
Steve Search for the budget team. Just want to clarify, your ask is is that correct that it's $81,720?
Yeah, that's correct, sir.
That's what your budget request is?
That, yes.
Okay.
And we've had that same budget request for the last 2 years, because we're
And-
trying to grow our programming. That's the
and-
reason why we're requesting that increase. It helps add a little additional time for some more youth program staff.
Okay.
So there's
Well-
45,000 kids in Clay County, roughly, and, we're touching 1,000 of them. And so the more staff we can get, the more kids we can get into our programs, and that's kind of our goal.
Well, I'd just like to say you guys, and especially the 4-H component of it, does a great job. As
Thank
a former 4-H'er from about 50 years ago, I appreciate what you all do, so.
Wonderful.
Helping our youth, so thank you.
Thank you.
When we started, there were 3 H's.
Well, and I probably should mention too that besides just the 1,000 4-H kids, on a normal year when it's not coronavirus, the Clay County office touches about 10,000 Clay County citizens. So that's usually what our number is. So I think that's a nice return on your guys' investment.
Now, there's the Master Gardeners, and you participate in community gardening. So, I mean, there's just...
But most of our Master Gardener sites for the Kansas City region are in Clay County.
There you go, that's great. Does the administrator have any thoughts or questions to express?
Ditto on all the previous comments.
Very good, very good. If you have any closing comments, we certainly appreciate you being here, but I hope we've made this as painless as possible.
This is great. No, we really wanted to just introduce ourselves. And, yeah. We didn't know we were going to have such an audience, so it's nice to meet everyone today.
Yes, we appreciate your time and your support and all of your nice words. It's nice to hear, and I'll make sure I repeat them to the rest of the crew who didn't get to sit here today and hear them.
Well,
We get the
this-
privilege of doing this part, but we have a lot of others in the office.
As I pointed out, this is being live streamed so that it will be on our YouTube, so if you want to
I'll share it that way.
relive the glory days, then you're certainly welcome to do that.
Thank you so much.
And also, when we're not in coronavirus, most of our programs are open for you guys to come visit.
Yes.
If you want to see them in action, see us work, teach, if you want to learn something yourselves, please go to our website. We offer things for all ages, so.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here today. That will conclude our budget hearings. That brings us to comments on non-agenda items. This meeting is open to the public, although under the coronavirus limitations, I don't see too many people here, but I'll ask for comments from the public. Seeing none. Are there any comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Carpenter?
No, just would reiterate, I think this has been a good, healthy process, and I'm glad to be a part of it with y'all. So, thanks.
Commissioner Thompson?
I agree. I think it's been a great day, and we've been having a good week, and it's Wednesday, right? It's Wednesday.
Wednesday it
So,
is.
yeah, we're still more fun to have. Yeah.
The only comment that I'd like to make is I would like to be able to reach out to some of the, and I think I've gotten a list from the clerk, some of the contracts that we have that might be pending to call for a pause on. If you don't mind me using my own discretion, I think some of them have already been paused, but I will try to make sure that I communicate back anybody I've talked to talk about maybe pausing some of the expenses we have until commission has had time to examine them and look through them, if that's acceptable.
Yes, can you clarify for me what you mean, which other projects you're talking about?
Largely
Pausing?
advertising, that sort of thing. I think there's already a halt on one of the entities that we were going to be spending advertising money through for tourism.
Okay.
So it would be along those lines, and just give them a heads up that we need to, we need to, as a commission, evaluate so that we can at least pause the spending so
Sure.
that they can go
All
forward
right.
from there. Is that
Works for me.
okay?
That works great.
And like I say, I will communicate back through the administrator and the clerk as far as who I talk to, so everybody is kind of on the same page on that one. Office holder comments. Are there any office holders who would like to comment on items not on our agenda? Okay, seeing none. On agency comments, I believe the clerk's office had some thoughts that she wanted to express with getting signatures on some documentation.
Yes, we need,
Go ahead and use the mic.
we need commissioner signatures on some warrants that we have here, and then we have one here that's a problem, and somebody needs to look at this and see who wants to sign it. Right now, it won't be paid. So, you might want to look at that one.
Okay. And again, for clarification for those listening, a warrant is essentially a bundle of accounts payable grouped in like items, and it requires at this point, it now requires signature of 2 commissioners to go forward. I should say the approval of 2 commissioners to go forward. Previous to this, it was assigned to just county staff could approve without commission.
That's correct.
Without commission consideration, so I think this is an improvement. So obviously something that I think moves us in the right direction. Was there anything else from the clerk's office?
No, I think this is a good improvement over paying our bills. It's transparency, I think the word is.
I've heard that word. Anything from the budget team on closing out before we reconvene?
No, and I thank Steve Sirks here for the budget team. I thank Commissioner Nolte and the other commissioners for keeping this on schedule today.
By golly, we are on schedule.
I think that clock, that working clock up there may have helped.
Very good. With that, if there are no other comments on non-agenda items, did the administrator have anything? Nothing from him? Very well. With that, we will adjourn. Once again, we will be meeting tomorrow, January 14 at 9:30 a.m., and we will be continuing our budget hearings. With that, we are adjourned.